Attention denizens of planet Earth.
Broadcasting from Carbondale in Southern Illinois' premier comic shop. And now your host, superlative shaman of comic book knowledge, Dan Brown. Flash the match signal in case of emergency for your host with the most on his mind, Matt Morton. Watch out, criminals. There's nothing funny to him about truth, justice, and the American way. It's Commander Harris himself, Scott Reed. And tuning in from the far reaches of no man's land, the mad scientist dream leader, Mike New. This is Campus Comics Cast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Campus Comics Cast. This is our Halloween episode, and with us live here in Campus Comics at 816B East Main Street in Carbondale is the usual crew. First we have
Dan Brown.
And Scott Reed.
Yep, and I'm Matt Martin, as usual. So we've got a short list of things to go over, just sort of some reviews and some discussion. We're going to talk, like I said, it's our Halloween episode, so we're going to talk about Batman the Long Halloween first. There was initially some discussion about favorite Halloween stories, but mostly we all just came to the conclusion that Long Halloween's awesome, and we want to talk about that. So we're going to do that. And then we've got some discussions of recent comic book movies and trailers and TV shows, and we'll roll on through. So, who wants to start with Long Halloween? Who has first thoughts? Or am I opening this up?
It's a good story. I like it a lot.
It are good.
I would see it again and again.
Yeah,
it was
true.
much better
well,
than
you'll
Cats.
be able to soon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, allegedly.
I very much
Allegedly.
want that to be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look, it's going to become apparent really quickly if that is happening, right? Because there will just continue to be more Rogues Gallery
Galleries,
castings.
castings.
I mean,
So-
okay. Well, here's the thing. Which thing are we talking about? Because there is the
This is
rumor
the animated movie. Are you
the
talking about that?
animated movie.
I'm talking about the Batman.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Okay,
the thing.
yeah.
Both
Yeah,
things are
okay.
news.
Yeah,
is out
I know
there for
I know
these.
the animated
Just to
thing is supposed to be
clarify.
happening soon, which made me think maybe the Batman's not as long Halloween-y as we thought.
Yeah.
Because why would they do that? But
Yeah. So if you haven't read this story before, first off, you should have.
yeah,
But Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy took a lot from this story.
yeah, quite a bit.
So-
the Two-Face stuff especially.
Exactly. And so my thing is like, how do you even adapt that into another movie?
I know.
Like that.
So should we summarize Long Halloween first?
So, Long
yeah.
Halloween is a story of a serial killer that is loose in Gotham City that is mostly killing criminal elements. It's from like the Boss Maroni and the Roman Falcone,
right.
and that gang of named criminals that you've seen in Batman, both the cartoons and the comics for a long time. And they strike on calendar holidays. So they call this person Holiday or the Holiday Killer, and it is a year-long thing. It goes from Halloween to Halloween. And, of course, there are some twists and turns along the way.
And 13 issues long.
Yep. And basically, almost everyone from Batman's Rogues Gallery shows up. I think the only...
All the significant characters.
Right, all the
really
significant
are.
ones from the year 1-2 kind of stuff. So there's no Ra's al Ghul and there's no Bane.
Right.
And other than that, I can't really think of any major Batman villains who don't show. There's a lot of minor ones that don't, like Clock King's not in it or whatever, but
But you get several minor
you-
ones as
yeah,
well,
right,
like
has-
Calendar Man.
Calendar
there's
Man
like
is-
Calendar Man's in it
Yeah.
and some other stuff that you wouldn't necessarily like. And the way that they go about, it's not just every single issue is one at a time. Solomon Grundy's in it twice, right?
Yeah.
But in really weird ways. And then Scarecrow and Mad Hatter are in the same issue together. And then Joker's in more than one. And Catwoman's in like half of them. So, yeah. So it is exactly what you think it is. It's a long Halloween story, and the covers are fairly famous. That all of it's by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, who everybody knows if you're a more modern reader for all the Marvel stuff that they did together. But they did 3 Legends of the Dark Knight annuals that were Halloween themed, right? Were they all Halloween themed?
They were specials, but yeah, they were basically
At least 2 of them
Halloween.
were Halloween
Yeah.
issues. I know. Okay. And then they just sort of like 3 holiday issues, and Archie Goodwin, I think, pitched Jeff Loeb, do you want to do a more substantial Batman book? They did this, and then they did Dark Victory after that, and they did Superman for All Seasons as well, which I still think Superman for All Seasons is probably my favorite Superman story
it's
of all
great.
time.
That's really
has my
underrated.
single favorite Superman moment of all time.
You don't-
which is
you
the
don't hear
thanks
about
my
that.
mom made it for me.
Yeah, you don't hear enough about that, like the best Superman stories list and that kind of thing.
Before we spin back, I have to say Dark Victory kind of gets short shrift from a lot of people because it isn't nearly as good as Long Halloween.
Yeah,
but
it's still a
Dark
good story.
Victory is really good, and it's the most logical explanation for Robin I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And like it was the first time I read it and thought, oh, well, that's not just stupid. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like he exists because they needed a teenage character.
Right.
When we all know that's why he exists, but like an in canon, an in continuity reason for why Batman had a teenager kind of got explained in Dark Victory, and I kind of liked it.
And as I was rereading Long Halloween for this, I'm like, I got to go back and reread Dark Victory.
It's
It's been
the
so
same-
long.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, I want to
know.
read those specials. I
Yeah.
want to read Dark Victory, and I want to read
Yeah,
Superman
and
for all
again,
seasons
if you're
again.
wanting something to read for Halloween, all those specials they did before this too are perfect.
What did they call? It's called
One of
Haunted
them-
Night. Is the trade?
I think so.
It's like
yeah.
an orange trade. Looks exactly
Yeah,
like
but
the
like
other
one
two.
of the specials was called Madness. And
Yep.
a
I
couple
think it's
other
the very
titles
first
like
one,
that.
right?
I think so. So yeah, but those are all worth checking out too. It's by the same team and everything.
So what I will say, and we're not going to go issue by issue because that is an even longer podcast than we
Yeah.
would normally have. But we just sort of had like some thoughts about why it makes it, what makes it so good. So the big takeaway for me was, so I read it. It was published in 96 and 97. I didn't read it until I got back into comics in 99. Famously, it is a book that Dennis directly recommended to me when I was just a customer here and not an employee. I was here. I used to come over. I had a long break in between my English classes, and I would just walk over when the store was on the strip the same days every week and try to find something to kill time. So I would try to get at least one comic to go sit outside and read a comic under a tree kind of thing. And I was bumming around, and I had picked up a couple of Greg Rucka's detectives, and Dennis knew I had liked them. And he said, have you read Long Halloween? And I had never even heard of it.
Right.
And he was like, you should check that out. I remember you liked Batman when you were a kid. Did you like the animated series? And I'm like, oh my God, the animated series is the reason I read Batman in the first place. And he was like, oh, well, then you will love it. And I still, when I read it, I think, man, like, I loved it at the time, but to reread it now, so there were a couple things that really hammered me that I don't think I would have appreciated, and I know I didn't back then. One is how much that book is directly a product of its immediate influences, which is the obvious part is the Batman animated series, right? It feels like a more adult version of an animated series episode to me.
Quick side note: as I was reading this, I just coincidentally was listening to some of Batman the Animated Series soundtrack, and it's perfectly appropriate for this story. It works really well.
The visual look of
tone.
Gotham is
Yeah.
the look of Gotham. The look of the characters basically is the animated version. Catwoman's the only one that doesn't look basically exactly like
Yeah.
she does in the animated series, and hers is pretty close. But the other thing that got me was there's way more of a Frank Miller vibe to it than I thought there was at first. There's the part where he knees somebody. He has a midsection knee, right, like an MMA style clinching knee, and there's an internal dialogue where he says something about how he feels the ribs give way and it's satisfying, and that like I like violence felt so Frank Miller to me.
Right.
And when I read it in '99. I hadn't read enough Frank Miller Daredevil to appreciate that was a hallmark Frank Miller kind of moment.
Right.
And I thought, man, this is really cool. You can tell that Loeb sat down and looked at the two Titan storylines of that time. In 96, 97, what's the best versions of Batman in the recent past, which is post-crisis? Year One and the animated series, right? But the thing that also got me was I don't think I really remembered how much that influenced everything that came after it. So if you read Tom King's, dude, Tom King's whole run is based on Long Halloween as far as the Batman-Catwoman relationship is concerned. Like some scenes feel like he just went back and did an homage. And I don't say it as an insult. Like it's just that good that he basically retold some of these moments. And it's really cool to think that it sits sort of like in between two eras of the character. It's a precursor of what was going to come in the next 20 years after that. But it's a really great version of post-crisis Batman that would have been about 10 years old at the time. So it wouldn't have felt terribly like a throwback. But it does now, right? To like, you can sort of put it in the place of Batman history.
Well,
It's
there
really
are some earmarks too that are this is post-crisis continuity. You know what I mean?
the Gordon's relationship and Barbara not existing, but Barbara being
well,
the wife.
even just the courtroom scene with Harvey Dent, like Batman is in a specific undercover disguise outfit that he was in. Like that's continuity at that point. That outfit and everything for that.
I mean, Long
scene.
Halloween basically follows Year One.
Yeah.
More, maybe two, more or less. It's in that Year 1, 2 area.
Definitely that kind of vague time period that they had.
It's like
back
Year
then.
1.5.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So is this the first like appearance of the Falcone family? Do we see them prior to this? I
They
can't remember
are
if this was that
mentioned in
series.
Year One. I'm
Are
not
they
sure if
in-
they
okay.
show them or
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
Because that's the scratches on his face are from Year 1, aren't they?
Oh, I'd
Doesn't
have to go-
Catwoman scratch his face
I
in
know
Year
Catwoman
One?
does. Yeah, is it Year One? 'Cause I was thinking it was in here, and then it never happens, and I'm like, wait a minute, it all runs together at a certain point.
I know Catwoman's in
yeah.
Year 1.
Yeah.
Because that's where she's a hooker instead of
What?
being a debutante.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's from year one. And I think when she
It's
becomes
that's
Catwoman, I
probably what
think
it
she
is.
scratches Roman's face
Okay.
in that. And they never explain it in Long Halloween. In my head, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, there's a flashback in Long Halloween that explains the cat scratches on him, and there's not. I think it's
Yeah.
just a throwback to year one.
Yeah. Oh, also, we talked about Dark Victory. We also want to talk about Catwoman winning Rome real quick, because that's the same creative team. It's a 6-issue, I think, series that they
Oh
did.
yeah, I forgot that.
That's
was them.
that's the thing. People keep forgetting about this.
you know,
and if
I
you
was
like
thinking-
Long Halloween, definitely check that story out.
I was thinking
too.
that was a Darwin Cook one, but it's not.
Yeah,
Darwin
no,
Cook had
no.
a different graphic novel.
Yeah, that was
a
Selena's
hardcover.
big score
Yep,
or whatever.
Yep.
But
You're
yeah,
right. That is
Catwoman
really-
winning
that
Rome
really
is
good.
another one to check out if you like this story. And
Go on
again,
eBay when we get off the show.
yeah, people forget,
Forgot
but
about
it's
that.
out there, and it's a good just Catwoman story.
It is.
by the
It is.
same team, and it's same continuity and all that.
Yep.
Yes. What did you think about this as that origin of Harvey Dent in Two-Face?
I mean, it's basically the origin of Two-Face. It's what we have
Right.
now
Yep.
because of this story.
Same thing
you
as in the
know.
animated series, and
Yeah.
kind of the same thing as Dark Knight. It's not, but it
It's
feels
close. It's
very
very close.
But
inspired
there's a
by.
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of Dark Knight, the movie that was taken from here. The I Believe in Harvey Dent.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what it was. All
you
the
know,
political feelings.
Yeah,
of it.
the prisoner transfer, all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
you,
There's a
you
lot of
forget
beats.
how
they
much
took.
of it was just lifted out, and
Yeah.
again, not a complaint in
No,
any
no,
way.
no.
Because I've never seen a comic book movie that didn't steal from multiple actual comic books, right?
Well, if they
So
don't,
maybe
they're
you-
not very good.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I'm
comic
saying.
movies.
Like,
You want
and so
that.
the real factor
Yeah.
is not did they steal; it's did they pick the right things
Yes.
from
Yeah.
which to steal. So it's a compliment to Dark Knight that they picked the right Batman
Yeah.
source material to rip. I want them to do that.
Yeah.
God, that isn't that half the fun as a comic fan, a paper comic fan, seeing a comic movie
Mm-hmm.
that you want to see the stuff that you've only seen on a printed page done live action. Even bad comic book movies, that's the great part about them, is seeing something that resonates with you as a reader to see it live action. So yeah.
So when you finish reading at the end of Long Halloween, they basically imply and are flat out say that there actually were 3 holiday killers.
Yeah,
So
they say
what-
2, and then there's the extra
Yeah.
twist is
Yeah.
there weren't 2,
There were 3.
Yeah.
But okay, so to me that feels a little like shoehorned there in the end. I don't know that I necessarily buy that. It just feels wrong to me. What do you think?
The only thing that's ever bothered me about it was, so I liked the explanation that there was more than one killer, because I always thought it was a little silly that no one could figure out the one person, right? Because Batman should be able to track that. But if there were multiple killers, then that's like muddying the waters, right? Batman didn't realize he was chasing 2 people. That's why it was hard to do. What makes it implausible is they weren't coordinating.
Right,
Yeah,
So how do they not
exactly.
have double murders on some of these holidays,
Yeah.
which would, of course, give the whole thing away. If there were 2 people killed on this one, he'd be like, oh, because there were 2 killers.
killers,
Got it.
yeah.
So that's the part that makes it a little implausible, but I still don't hate it.
No, I
it's
don't-
such
I
a
don't
cool
hate it,
ending.
yeah.
If this were any other story, I'd be furious and call it a cop out.
Yes.
But the story's so well done, I'll forgive it for it.
Yeah.
And I also feel like I'm wondering too if this is also a thing from DC,
That's very
because
odd.
they've had a history of setting up a big mystery, people figure it out, and then they shoehorn in a change at the end, which
yeah.
they've done repeatedly.
Because when you're reading it, I mean, it's pretty
Yeah.
obvious that Alberto, is that
Yeah.
right? Is really should have been the main killer. Right.
He violates that one pretty basic comic law: no body, no dead.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So like
yeah,
he,
it's
he
pretty
is,
obvious.
He is killed and he is shot and dropped over over the side
railing
of
of
a,
a boat, yeah.
yacht, and there's blood in the water, and they treat him as dead, but
Mm-hmm.
no one finds the body. So as a comic fan, you kind of know he's not really. You don't know necessarily that he is the killer, but you do have that definitely inkling that he's gonna come back because no
Yes.
one found the body.
And plus the fact that early on, even though his father's trying to keep him out of the family business, it's pretty obvious he wants to be involved.
Yeah.
Well, there's also just all of the
yeah.
Godfather beats.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
It's just Batman meets Godfather, because there is the, I tried to keep, he is essentially Michael, but kind of a weasel instead of like the almost anti-hero of the story like Michael is in Godfather.
But I do love the fact that the Riddler didn't die on April Fool's Day. That was just such a nice little
Well,
touch on that.
I remember
one.
when I first read it,
Yeah.
I'm like, how are they getting out of killing Riddler?
Yeah.
You know
but
what
it's
I
so
mean? There's
awesome. It's
no
an
way.
April Fool's gag, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't kill him, and they
Yeah.
even do the Looney Tunes thing where the bullets go
Yeah.
around his outline. And, it's so cool. It's very, very cool.
So as I was rereading it, I kept kind of thinking about Hush too, again by Jeff Loeb, 12-issue story, and it's just like they handle so many things better in Long Halloween than they did in Hush. You know, even with like the multiple, villain at the end and that kind of thing.
I will say though, in Hush, anybody who was a customer here and listened to me rant about it back in the day, I called the Clayface Jason Todd thing way early. I kept telling him, is there ever a time, I remember I said this 100 times, is there ever a time where Batman lost line of sight on him? That's how you know it was really Jason Todd and Clayface replaced him. That's what happened. That's what it turned out would be what happened. But so I still think I feel like Hush was a test of, will people accept Jason Todd coming back?
Sure.
And had people been like, this is terrible, I don't want this, they would have just quietly kept it Clayface. But they gave themselves the out and were like, oh, it went real well, go. Pull the trigger. But you're right, it is much, much better. Like, and Loeb, if you don't remember, Loeb is who wrote the Hush arc with Jim Lee, and it's largely the same thing, 12 issues versus 13 issues. Kind of the same kind of story.
A lot of villains in there.
I was going to say,
you know what I mean?
It's the Run the Gamut of Rogues Gallery. It's a giant interconnected mystery. It's one big story. So it does feel very comparable, and you're not wrong. I mean, Dark Victory is better than Hush, too. Honestly. It's just a different kind of story.
But I feel like Hush is more well regarded, and that might just be because of Jim Lee's place in the company at this point.
I did see somebody refer to it as the critically acclaimed and beloved graphic novel, and I thought it was commercially successful, and it was fan popular. I mean, everybody was excited to see Jim Lee draw Batman on a long run. But I don't know that I would have ever. I don't remember people being particularly.
Is it in your top 5 Batman stories?
I mean, it might be in somebody's top 10 just because you loved seeing Jim Lee.
Exactly.
It was a real trip to see Jim Lee draw Batman, right?
Wasn't Hush just part of the regular Batman?
It was.
Story?
It was 608.
Yeah, it wasn't a separate series like Long Halloween, so probably more people have read Hush than have read Long Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, again, I know I said it earlier, but Long Halloween came out in 96, 97 when the industry was dying. The same way that Kingdom Come did. It was like it was what's so great that people forget about how awesome late 90s, early 2000s DC was when they had nothing to lose and they were taking chances on stuff. And that's how you got some really, really great books like Morrison's Justice League and Kingdom Come and Long Halloween. And they were like, well, what's the difference? The industry's falling down around our ears. May as well make good books. And then it turned out not to be the end of the world. And so we get all this stuff. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason it's less appreciated was it wasn't a book that was on the shelf when a lot of people who were reading comics when Hush came out were even reading comics necessarily. Hush was about 10 years later. It's like 2004, 2005, something like that.
Around that, yeah. And again, just going back reading this again now, it's like Tim Sale's artwork, very expressionist.
It's honestly better here than it is later.
I love his ink wash stuff that he does, and there's none of that in here. And it felt weird not seeing it, but I really like this. I'm pretty sure there's a noir version they've done of this, the black and white collection.
Oh, no kidding.
And now great. I really want to go back and get that too.
Me too.
So
that sounds great.
Just a really nice, and I know his art's kind of divisive if you just want standard superhero art.
Well, sure, there are crazy people who don't like it.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I really love it, and it's just such a huge Batman. It does really feel like a Frank Miller kind of physique Batman in this. Just a real fun take on some of these characters.
I mean, it is one of those books that if somebody had never read a Batman comic before and wanted to understand why people have loved this character for 80 years, you could be like, here you go, read this. And you would, at this point, we're going back to where we started, but I think a lot of people would then go, oh, this is familiar. This reminds me of several other versions. But that's what's great is that everything, it's like a supercut of Batman, right? It's a greatest hits album of Batman, but it's got more cohesion than a greatest hits
and I do like the sort of transition of the criminal element in Gotham too. It's like where we see Falcone starting to hire some of the freaks, and that kind of thing.
Gordon says something about not that I'm blaming you, but
exactly.
And you get the beginning of that idea.
Yeah. Also, which I think is an idea we'll revisit later in the podcast too. But
I also like the scene where Two-Face is letting everybody out of Arkham Asylum and he doesn't let Calendar Man out.
And he's just standing there staring at the glass. Like, come on, man.
There were just some of those moments like that were just so good. So
the way that he draws the Joker that almost looks like Looney Tunes art is so great. I get that is, again, we said sales art's divisive. It doesn't look like a human person.
No.
It's very exaggerated.
Oh, yeah.
But it works so well.
Yeah, but it's what the character feels
so
like.
Good. Yeah. So it doesn't feel wrong
And
for
like
him to look like that.
Yeah, and like this is an artist who does not draw everybody the same,
Right.
And that's to his strength.
Yep.
Because you have that, and then you
It's
have
not
like
Steve Dillon, where literally every person has the
exactly.
same face. Rest in peace. I love Steve Dillon.
right, exactly. But
same
and then-
face on everybody.
But you have Joker, Riddler, and then you have Solomon Grundy in this. You know what I mean? Just kind of runs the
And
gamut.
all completely different.
Oh, and I
styles.
think this is also the first in continuity or like in comic version of a green skinned Poison Ivy. Also is here in Long Halloween.
Oh yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I always think that she looked that way in the animated series, and then I watch it, and I'm like, oh no, she didn't.
Yeah, it was
Like,
in the
she's-
new
she's had
Batman
the suit-
Adventures when they kind of did that with her. But as far as the comics go, this was the first time that we didn't have a Caucasian skin tone Poison Ivy.
All right, we'll move on to the second thing.
So-
are we going to give it a grade, or are we just going to...
Oh, it's an
Near-
11 out of 10.
Yeah, it's near mint for Long Halloween for sure.
Yeah,
This is
and
like I've
It
read
is
this a few
legitimately an
times.
all-time classic.
Yeah.
I will read it again.
I regret not having waited this long to actually read it.
Well, I was going to say something similar. Was I can't
Yeah.
believe I haven't reread it sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think the last time I read it was when I got the Absolute, and that's been quite some time ago. It's been 10 or 12 years or something like that.
I haven't just because I don't reread a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
just
same,
as a
same.
rule.
But I mean,
But, yeah.
there are a couple of things that I do have a tendency to pull back down and revisit just because it's like comfort food, man. Some stuff is so good that you're like, you read it again and you're like, nope, it's still fantastic.
Yeah.
I knew it was good. It's still better than I remembered, So yeah, I was very happy about it.
On to Legion?
I think so. So
Or on to not really the Legion?
Yeah, we're rolling on to the second thing, which is issues 1 and 2 of Legion of Superheroes Millennium. If you haven't checked this out, this is the little 2-part mini that sort of bridges the gap between the previous version of what the Legion history future looks like, and it's going to be a lead into the new Legion ongoing series that actually starts next week, right?
I think so.
I
It's
think Legion
soon.
1 is next week.
It's coming
Almost
up.
positive.
I'm not for sure, but...
Yep. So, all right, go ahead. Thoughts? Mine are less positive than theirs, I think.
Okay, so I guess I should, preface this by I'm not the big DC guy in the room, right? And I don't have a long history of reading Legion of Superheroes. So I was expecting, I guess the big disappointment, if there is one to say about these issues, is that there's not a whole lot of Legion superheroes in here.
Yeah, there's
No.
almost
Yeah,
none.
yeah. So I mean, what is it? Literally the last page,
Right.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
all
There's
you really.
been
the
more
second-
Legion in Action Comics than there was in a book that says Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah. So it really shouldn't have been advertised as Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little misleading on DC's part.
So when the rumor first happened that they were making a book about that was this, it was just called Millennium in the rumors, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's a throwback reference to the post-crisis
Crisis,
book."
yeah.
Oh, okay, that was good. Like, and I understood what they were going for. Millennium's thing was to sort of like bridge timeline gaps and introduce new characters and new status quos. Fine. And then I feel like they tacked that Legion on there to tie it into the other book, and I don't actually dislike the book. I dislike the way it was pitched and what I actually got compared to what I
Yeah.
expected.
That's understandable, I think.
And I said this before the podcast started. I feel like this could have been one $5 or $6, 64-page, 96-page, whatever. Because these are both oversized issues, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're both
$5
$4,
issues.
Yeah, $4.99
$5.
issues,
I
and
feel like we could have condensed this down to one.
Yeah.
but they
then-
actually read pretty quick. So
They do.
don't-
They
yeah.
do.
But then they get $10 out of you, Matt, instead of 6
Exactly.
or 7.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
But I kind of so one, I'm not familiar with the Rose and Thorn character, so that was kind of. I mean, I've heard the name before, but I've not really read much with her in it. So it was one. I actually think that's a pretty interesting character, and I actually like how Bendis used her to basically move us from modern DC to the Legion of Superheroes
the
DC.
audience POV character.
Yes, exactly. So
And plus, a lot of this stuff that they cover, the alternate futures of DC, are things that Dan and I know because we're DC super fans, but are not particularly well-known parts of DC's history.
well, and some of it they've changed for this,
Right, and I was going to
Yeah,
say, so
yeah.
first of all, most people don't know what this is in the first place. Secondly, they won't understand what is being how this is important. So I think that's actually works to the benefit. You see the changes if you're a longtime fan, and you're like, oh, cool, like things have been shaken up. But if you don't know what Commandy's future looks like.
Right.
It doesn't matter to you. You're being introduced to Commandy's future the first time. So
Yeah,
it's going to go right over your head that this is different.
I do like the kind of chronology we get of it now,
I do too.
because they've always been vague about what happens when.
It's like a
and that kind of
travel
thing.
log
Yeah,
of
yeah, it
DC's
is.
future going ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that's really smart. And I actually like that a lot. But I think, again, it should have been pitched as take a journey into DC's future kind of thing.
Instead of
Not,
history of the
this
DC
is a
universe,
Legion
it's
book.
future of the DC
Right.
universe.
But we both, I think nobody's going to disagree. This sold better with the word Legion of Superheroes
for
on
sure.
it than if they had
Probably,
called it History of the DC Universe. The History of the Marvel Universe book doesn't sell.
Yeah,
It should. It's really cool. But it's definitely a straight for the nerds kind of book too, right?
Yeah, I would not have bought this if it had just been Millennium, just because of the fact that I don't really have fond memories of the old Millennium series. You know, and I have tons of those that show up in not complete series and collections that I buy, and I actually hate seeing that book.
That's the one that has the first modern Suicide Squad in it, right? Isn't that in
No,
there?
that's Legends.
Legends. Okay,
That's
yeah,
Legends.
I'm getting the two mixed up.
Yeah,
okay.
So that's Legends, but like one of the big changes that I noticed in the timeline was the fact that OMAC was pushed much further into DC's future because, well, in before he was part of the current, and then in New 52 he was current. I guess this is the first time he showed up in Rebirth, right?
Yeah, the original OMAC's in the future. The Kirby OMAC is in the future.
Oh, that's right. It is. It is in the future.
But then it became the Mother Eye stuff in the pre-New 52 post-crisis. That was the early 2000s.
Right. Well, there was also not a single guy. It became like the
right. It was the OMAC project.
Yeah, the core and stuff like that.
Yep. Which is hilarious because that's literally what OMAC means.
Yeah.
Core.
Yeah. One man army core.
Yeah. It's like when people say ATM machine.
Yeah.
Or DC Comics.
Correct.
But so that was kind of interesting to see that change. I actually enjoyed the Rosenthorn character, at least how Bendis was writing her, and that whole thing, not in the not too far future where they don't have mental illness, or at least split personalities anymore, so she loses the ability to medicate herself to keep the Thorn personality from coming out, and how that kind of carries forward. She just kind of
she's like trying to find the right drugs.
Yeah, but she just kind of accepts it and knows that she's going to have to deal with both of her personalities.
I do like
forward.
the shift where she wakes up, she doesn't know where she is, how long she's been gone, that kind of thing.
It's like it's Memento.
Yeah. And then, but
what situation have you put me in? And they both do it, right?
Yeah.
Rose doesn't. So if you don't know, Rose and Thorn is basically a female Jekyll and Hyde. Rose is very mild-mannered, and Thorn is kind of crazy, but also kind of a badass. So Thorn is the sort of superhero personality of the two. And whenever one of them takes over, they start fresh, not knowing what the other one's been doing. So they're always in these, okay, how the heck did I get here kind of things. And sometimes the situations in this mini are I feel like when she wakes up in a spacesuit. Where are we, and why am I doing this, and how long can I stay alive?
Yeah. And there's a lot of art transitions to these stories.
Yeah.
But man, when she goes into space, these pages are just
it's nice.
amazing.
Oh, it's
it is.
good.
I mean, now it's not really regular comic book art either.
No, but it fits that sequence really well.
It is amazing. It's incredible. I mean, it's just it is so good.
It made me understand when I saw all the artists why Bendis wrote this, because you can get artists to do 2 and 3 page, this many artists to do this many short stints to say, oh, I was in Brian Bendis' Legion reboot book. There you go. It's a prestige book in that regard, not in the format.
But overall, I mean, I actually really enjoyed it. Again, I don't have a whole lot of. It was nice to see the DC history. I actually enjoyed Bendis' take here of how the DC future is going to lay out. I wish I would have seen more Legion in it, just because that's an area where I am definitely weak on in my knowledge of the Legion superheroes. I'm going to start picking up monthly the Legion book, so I'm actually excited to read it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the title of it, though, it's like, you want to put Legion on there tied in, but if you don't put Legion, it's just Millennium, then you've got Robbie Williams fans picking up this book. They're just really upset that he's not in here. You know what I mean? So
and Star Wars fan asking if book 2 is called Falcon.
Yeah,
Book 1's Millennium, book 2's Falcon, right? They own Star Wars. But I would still probably give it. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. I really liked it. it was a weird experience to read it, to enjoy it, and yet be let down by it at the same
Right.
time. It's like, this isn't what I thought this was.
For me, the whole thing too was like I haven't been reading Bendis' Superman run, so Rose and Thorn just seems like a weird choice.
It is.
For this.
It is.
But it's a character that nobody else cares about.
Yeah,
so
that's the
he has a
thing.
little bit
Like
more
I'm
freedom.
fine. Yeah, do something with her.
We've talked about this before. I'm a huge fan of Marvel and DC's B and C list because you can do all kinds of things with those
Right,
guys.
yeah.
Like people are like, sure, you want to reboot X-Force with totally different characters? Book doesn't sell anyway. Do what you want.
And I would rather see them throw Rose and Thorn in a book like this than come out with some random 4-issue miniseries
Right.
just to keep
And
the,
then
to
say,
keep
well,
the-
we tried and you guys didn't buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So I think when we were talking about this on a previews episode previously, my guess was Lois Lane was traveling.
Oh, that's right. I
through them.
forgot. I
You know,
forgot.
well, because you
kinda-
had that
we kinda
whole
guessed.
Millennium.
No, and that was a really smart prediction.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little irritated because that was a really good prediction.
Well, see, the thing is, before this came out, I kept kind of thinking about that, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, then you
we
would
knew
have,
it was female, right?
yeah,
Hadn't there been a
because
rumor that it
we'd
was
seen the cover, I
Okay,
think, because
that's
the
what it
cover was released.
Oh yeah,
for
because
number
I just said,
one.
oh, it's probably just Naomi.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. I remember that now.
And
I
Naomi does
stand by
appear.
that. It kind of looks like her on that cover. dang it.
And it kind of, but she is in
And
the
she is
book
in it,
just
yeah.
for one page.
Yeah.
You know, she's on one
But,
page,
like-
but she's there.
As I was thinking, you're going to go through this history of DC with a reporter kind of documenting things and that kind of, deal. And so, and then I got to thinking too, like, okay, if they're going to have Superboy, John in the Legion, how funny is it that he goes to the future to hang out with the cool kids and his mom's there?
That would have been
that was
great.
my thing.
Oh man, so dude, you haven't read any of the actions since John came back older?
No.
Dude, you have got to read them. There is, I think it might be in Supergirl. They're coming back from settling all this Jor-El stuff, and she's like, Supergirl and John are flying back to Earth, and he says, "Oh man, how am I going to explain this?" And Supergirl's like, "It's okay, it happened. It's not your fault." And he's like, they're not going to understand. I'm going to explain it, and they're not going to understand. And she's like, your mother loves you, John. And he's like, my mother? I don't care about that. How am I going to explain this to Damian? Damian's going to kill me. And then in the next issue, Damian first believes that it's a fake out and it's part of Leviathan. Then, then Damian is enraged that John has passed him in years.
Oh, yeah.
And then Damian is extra mad because he thinks maybe John's lost his virginity first. And he's like, wait, what else have you done before me? And John's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, and he's like, oh, no. And he's like, oh, good. So they're, I assume you saw that Bendis confirmed that they're doing a John takes Damian to the future with him arc.
Yeah.
At least one arc of it, which sounds fantastic. Like, I legitimately am so effing excited for Legion, and that's part of why I'm so salty about Millennium. Was I'm no less excited about Legion. I just thought I was getting it a little bit earlier, and I didn't. So it's like, well, okay. And it is a great way to bridge the gap, and it's a great way to fill people in on a very unappreciated part of DC's continuity.
for sure.
It just, I wish they'd been a little bit less secretive about what the heck the book was before they put it on the shelf.
And I do like that it's going to present an outline of what the time was like between current DC and Legion time, so we know kind of in broad strokes what occurred during that time.
You've seen that DC at New York Comic Con put out a timeline of the DC universe,
No,
too,
I
right?
did not.
It's up through the present day.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It means that Batman and Superman are like 70. But I
yeah.
think we're going to get all that resolved here in the near future. So I'm
Thanks.
fine with that. I think Doomsday Clock is going to
Probably,
resolve
yeah.
a
I was
lot
going
of
to say,
things.
Doomsday Clock as well. So
All that time stuff's going to be explained why it worked that way, and I'm fine with it. And if it turns out it's just hyper time, I'm okay with that too. I just liked having it. I feel the same way about the current DC continuity. I liked having a sequence of this is when so and so appeared.
Well,
this
the
is when
other
blah,
part
blah,
of
blah.
that too is it also helps with sort of a problem they have with Legion, where it's so far ahead, it's not tied to anything else DC. It's its own sort of corner of the universe.
and it has to
and
be,
that,
right?
And that
Because-
means you can ignore it, though, is the other part of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it has to be tied. This is the future of DC. So that means that every time DC has a world-shaking event,
Exactly.
then you have to go and revise Legion to be like, oh, no, they knew that happened.
Yeah.
Like, then why didn't they say something about it?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
because rules.
Yeah.
yeah.
So Legion is always going to be a problem. It's the same way that the Days of Future Past timeline is continuously just a few years from now, you know,
Right.
because they want to have that as a, well, it could still happen kind of thing.
Right.
And House and Powers of X did the exact same thing where it's like, well, it might still happen like that.
Right.
You kind of have to keep it at arm's length, but you're right. It makes Legion less important. So tying it into the, like, there's going to be back and forth between the present day is really a smart way to deal with it. They also sort of set the future as somewhat flexible now.
Yeah.
That, like, this is all, we've gone in uncharted waters kind of thing. That's why they had to reboot it and not make it the same old Legion as before. It doesn't make any sense at that point.
And, practically at some point you have to say this isn't working, or it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One
It's
or
just,
the other.
it's just too much. It's too much to juggle.
Yeah.
Too many balls in the air, man.
Well, they'll, at some point in the future, regardless of how good it is, they will do some type of reboot and it'll all change anyway. So.
Sure.
Exactly.
But for now.
Yes.
We got a fresh start in Legion and it looks pretty good.
And for somebody like myself who hasn't followed Legion, we
Right.
get to see it all through fresh eyes. So,
All right, on to point 3.
what do you want to grade it? So I go very fine plus. I actually really liked it, and I'm not any less psyched about Legion.
Yeah,
than
I would
was
too. I'd give
before.
it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah,
I go fine with it just because the Rose Thorn thing is just, I don't know.
It's a mess. I'm not saying it's not a
I'm not
mess.
being a stickler that it should have been Lois Lane.
yeah, you are.
I ain't trying to be that guy,
Oh,
but it's just like
Dan's mad as
I just don't know. I'm not mad. My
Dan's
fan theory
head
didn't
canon
come
doesn't
true,
match up.
but it's just like it seems like just such an out there character for
is.
this.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and is she going to have a role in Legion going forward? You know, like how does that work?
I'm really curious
Yeah,
because they're bringing Naomi in too.
yeah.
So we're clearly not done building it. I know they've sort of implied that they don't understand why the Legion isn't DC's X-Men, is what it amounts to.
Right.
And I don't know. I kind of think that's not an unfair comparison to have a younger super team of heroes, right? Like the Justice League will always be your moms and dads of superpowers because they're like the responsible adults. Well, maybe not always,
Right, yeah,
given
yeah.
the 5G rumors, but that's sort of the way that'll always feel. The same way the Avengers feel like the responsible adults of the Marvel universe, and the X-Men feel like the fun screw-ups of Marvel, right? So like you can do that with Legion, same way they used to do with Teen Titans. So,
But it's also
see.
it's got so much history and there's so much depth of character there. You could do a bunch of spin-off books. You know what I mean? There's definitely potential.
they have
there.
their own Wolverine.
Yeah, you know. So
Bloodshot trailer. You want to talk about it?
I'm in the tank for it, but everybody
Yeah,
knows that.
I
I love
figured that.
Valiant. I can't believe I'm going to pay money to see a Vin Diesel movie, which I haven't done since I saw Pitch Black in the theater. That also might be the last Vin Diesel movie I even saw. I can't remember a time that I watched a Vin Diesel movie on purpose.
I kept hearing for so long Valiant's do movies. Okay, we'll see.
Yep.
And it's happening. You know, they're getting this one at least.
Okay, now I guess I actually generally enjoy Vin Diesel movies.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't watch any of the Fast and the Furious movies just because that's just not my kind of movie.
And that's like 90%
But-
of his output.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Pitch Black, Chronicles of Riddick, Babylon AD, those are all movies. The Pacifier.
Iron Giant.
Was he a voice in Iron Giant?
Yeah,
And of course,
Iron
Guardians of
Giant.
the Galaxy, right? Because that's where he really his breakout role, right?
Right.
He really showed his range.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
But I don't actually, and as far as appearance goes, I mean, he's perfect for this role. I mean,
not bad.
yeah,
Not bad at
It's-
all.
You know, you're not gonna find anybody else who.
I mean, Bloodshot's not bald. That's about all
Yeah, I
that's
was wondering
wrong.
if-
That's
yeah,
about
it
all
was-
that's wrong.
He-
But
he
I
will
don't
be
know.
by the time
That's
this
what I was
movie
going to say
comes
was,
out.
I don't hate it. As a man who shaves his head, I don't hate it. So it makes my Bloodshot cosplay a lot easier. And I'm pretty darn pale. So I don't have very far to
There.
go. Yeah.
But I planned on seeing this movie. I just didn't know that it was ever going to come out.
Yeah.
But now we
Yeah.
actually have a trailer. That was kind of a surprise.
I will
so.
say, as a person who was a Bloodshot fan in junior high in the Valiant 1 era, and who is a Bloodshot fan in the modern Valiant era, the trailer was, I'm not saying the movie's going to be great. It might be terrible. But the trailer dramatically exceeded my expectations for it, because I kind of had the same feeling. As somebody who follows Valiant comics and news, I've thought the exact same thing. I've been hearing about this for years. I'll believe it when I see it. I still kind of can't believe that Bloodshot is the first one they did. I would have done Harbinger first, which is their X-Men. Bloodshot's role, if you don't know this, the goal of Bloodshot is to hunt Harbingers. That is what he does. He hunts. He's designed by the government to hunt mutants, basically.
What's he hunting in this?
Right. So it feels weird that we have him. He's basically just Weapon X. Like, oh, we made a super soldier kind of thing. Right. So I guess it's even kind of looks like they're implying that it's Project Rising Spirit. It looks like it's like Rising Spirit Technologies or something. I think it says RST or something on that. So it's Project Rising Spirit is the government project that created Bloodshot. So I love that. If you are a longtime fan, which is probably just me, there are a bunch of visual references to older issues and covers. When he's in the like memory machine, that is a reference to some old Valiant panels. And I saw somebody did side by sides of them, and I think it's really nice. And that's a credit to the fact that Dinesh Shamdasani, who was previously the owner of Valiant, is still an executive producer on the movies, and he's a super fan. He's a super fan. So he's going to make sure that, and that's what's always made me have a little bit more faith in this, was they would at least be faithful to the comics. I thought the budget would be crap, and it would look like something made for Sci-Fi Channel. Right. So that's where I was really impressed, was it seemed really well
looks
cut
like
together.
There's money behind it.
Yeah.
And they've got, you can argue whether or not Vin Diesel, you think Vin Diesel is a quality actor or not. I actually think he's pretty good. You know,
well,
but,
it's a name actor in this comic book action movie.
Guy Pearce is a super solid actor.
Yep. It's not a bad cast.
No,
really. You would think that it was going to be like, what's her name? It was in all the Sharknadoes. It was in American Pie. The blonde chick, like Tara Reid. I'm looking for like Tara Reid level of people's what I expected in this. You know, things where you're like, oh man, this is straight to cable, isn't it? Mm. And so the fact that they got people who A, can act, and B, are recognizable names. Even if Guy Pearce is a classic that guy, where you're like, oh, what's that guy's name? He was in LA Confidential, and what was that other thing?
Iron Man 3.
But then you look at me like, yeah, Guy Pearce, I love that guy. He's a great that guy. And there's nothing wrong with being that guy. And Vin Diesel's got a great voice for a gritty superhero, and he doesn't look wrong as it. And he is, look, that movie was made with Chinese money. Right, yeah. DMG Corpus, who basically owns Valiant now, and who put up the money for those movies. Vin Diesel's in a movie that makes billions of dollars in China. That's a very smart play. Right. That movie, even if it doesn't do anything here, it's gonna earn overseas. Yeah, it will make so much money in China off of the Vin Diesel alone. It will make so much money. So that's a very smart move. I don't have any problem with that either.
Yeah, I said I was going to see it regardless before. Now I'm actually starting to look forward to it. I'm actually looking forward to seeing it.
I thought it was going to be a movie that I was going to have to be like, okay, honey, we're going to see Bloodshot, and in exchange, I'll do this other thing you want to do that I don't want to do. But instead, I watched it and I was like, oh, well, she won't hate this. This will be fine. I thought it was going to be a straight up, like when I made her see, I don't remember what movie. It was a Jay and Silent Bob thing I made her see one time, I think. I know. We saw Scream 3 because Jay and Silent Bob were in it just to see how much of their cameo was in it. And I was like, oh no, this is a huge mistake. Now I have to watch a really terrible movie to pay her back. She paid me back immediately with a bad movie. And now we're back on even. But I thought I was going to have to like beg and plead to get her to agree to this. And my wife's pretty good to watch a geeky movie. But it looked much better and much more plausible to get to see it than I thought it would be.
So do you think, how long till we get in? What's the next Valiant movie after this?
The next one's supposed to be Harbinger.
Is it?
Yeah. Which is why I'm hoping they at least have some references to the fact that he's supposed to hunt Harbinger.
Getting after credits or something.
But I would have done it the other way. I would have introduced him as the villain in a Harbinger movie, and then had him break free and then have a standalone. But whatever. Right. It's not a terrible way to launch it. They're gonna go with a big name as far as their characters are concerned right off the bat. I want a Rye movie. I want I want all that other stuff. Obviously, I want Archer and Armstrong. So we'll see.
So which one do you want the most?
Eternal Warrior.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I love Eternal Warrior.
Joker?
Yep.
I got nothing to add. I didn't see it.
Okay, yeah. So I guess we'll try to keep it relatively
take a break.
Short. Okay, yeah. Matt will check his Twitter feed, see what Dan's posted today. You can follow him at Detective651.
I don't know if you know this or not, but Dan Brown is a copyright criminal and on the run from the law.
We don't need to get into that here. This is not the platform for that. I finally got around to seeing Joker the other day. I really enjoyed it.
Surprisingly, I enjoyed it. Now, that being said...
It is not the feel-good movie of the year by far.
No, it is morbid and depressing.
I read the plot on Wikipedia, and that was the end of me. I got invited to go to your showing, and Mona was like, do you want to go? And I said, baby, I read the plot. You don't want to go. I'm like, if you want me to go on my own, I'll go see it. But she was like, never mind, let's not.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a downer of a movie. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes it a bad movie or anything like that. But this,
I also don't think anybody was fooled. I did, however, I did have to tell my brother, who takes my 10-year-old nephew to comic book movies, don't be fooled. It's definitely R. Because my brother sees R and thinks of what R rating meant when we were kids, which is just there's some boobs and a lot of shooting. Yeah. And I was like, it ain't that. Don't take him to see this. This is not for him.
And I did the showing I went to. There was a dad who brought his sons. Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know if this is the movie for that dad. You know.
That is
of course we have the generation that takes their 10 and 9-year-olds to see Deadpool as well. So and I would rather my kids see
at least Deadpool's
Deadpool over this.
Right, Deadpool's at least not
Deadpool. I'm sorry. See Joker over Deadpool.
Really?
Because of the amount of language and all the innuendo and stuff. Oh, Scott. I mean, this is closer, and that's maybe the complaint about this is that this is closer to real life. Kids. There you go. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
my poor kids, they're so sheltered. So, and as bad as I am, my wife is worse. So,
man, I let my nephews see stuff that I knew that I saw in the 80s when they were little, and I found out why they retroactively re-rated a lot of things from the 80s. Because I was like, my wife would be like, they can't watch that, it's rated R. And I'm like, bull, it is not. I watched that when I was 7. I had uptight parents. Yeah. We're watching it. And then they'd be like, oh, there's a lot more language and nudity in this than I thought.
It was different in the 80s.
Whatever. Sure. I turned out fine. Let it roll. It's fine.
No, it is. I mean, again, this is not a superhero movie. This is a movie about mental illness and, this guy's spiral.
Mm-hmm. It's not one. It's not. I mean, I'm glad I saw it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to see it again. I might when it comes out on Blu-ray. I mean, I'll buy it, but I'm not going to be in a rush to watch it a second time. But but still, it was good.
Yeah. This probably isn't one you want to watch repeatedly.
No,
you know what I mean.
It's not a feel-good film, and it's not. You didn't get your blood.
That's a red flag if you do.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I loved Joaquin Phoenix's performance in this. I thought it was great.
He should have kept his shirt on more. I know that was deliberate, but apparently he lost like 40, 50 pounds.
Yeah, he lost a lot of weight, and
he is method as hell.
Yeah, there were a couple shots where I'm like, oh, that's like just anatomically that doesn't look right.
Yeah, that's not how a person is supposed to look, but that was part of what they wanted from this role. So I mean, I guess he's like Christian Bale does that a lot too.
You heard about all the weird gifts he sent people in the movie, right?
No,
Oh, well, that'll be a Google for you later.
Okay, all right. But I guess,
again, he is method as hell.
But now the Joker is, despite, what people think and people who cosplay as the Joker, this is not a character that you really should, hero worship or.
This is the story of a villain.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted. I didn't want Suicide Squad with this.
Right.
He's not an anti-hero. He's a bad guy. I don't need a sympathetic Joker.
And part of the thing is, to me, like, I've always felt, and I'm going to steal from the Daredevil TV series, is that the Joker, his motivation is he's just a guy that wants to see the world burn. He does. It's not that he has some terrible upbringing, which is kind of what we got in this movie. He just wants to see the world burn, but we got a different take, on the Joker in this film, because we kind of get an origin, which is we've only occasionally gotten the little pieces of an origin in the comics. So
I will be the segue Sam on this between point 4 and point 5, but my reservation with the existence of the movie. I'm not a big movies cause violence, video games cause violence kind of guy. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that satire is lost on stupid people.
Oh, for sure.
And so that is how you get people who see Taxi Driver and believe that they are supposed to idolize Travis Bickle. That is how you get people who watch Zack Snyder's Watchmen and think Rorschach is the hero. You get a lot of people who don't understand satire. Just goes over their head, and that I think it's a weird time to be making a movie about how an unappreciated white nerd rises up and starts a revolution. That's a real odd time in American history to make that movie and assume that your audience is smart enough to get the message. Because I assure you, a large portion of that audience is not smart enough to get the message. And walked out being like, frickin' right, Joker. Did not take away what they were supposed to take away from that. So Todd Phillips can preach until he's blue in the face, but he's an idiot if he doesn't understand how there's a difference between this and John Wick. John Wick has way more people die in it. It's not the same movie, and no one is at risk of seeing John Wick and deciding I'm going to become John Wick. At no point does that movie present itself as an achievable thing, man. No. This is an achievable goal.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Well, and you have you really as far as, the politics of it, you really have the whole throwback to the Bernie Getz, Subway Vigilante. You know, bring that into the more recent Occupy movement. I mean, it's all
like even that to me
there,
is a little is also irresponsible, because you're assuming that the people who watch this understand what New York in the 80s was like and what this is referencing. That is lost on people in their 20s who have the 80s might as well have been the 1880s at that point. They don't know what you're talking about.
When is this 70s-ish time period going to stop being the past in movies? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, when people our age stop going to movies.
Yeah.
That's when.
I guess.
But there's also the fact that, I don't know, like the 90s is now considered throwback.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You know, it dawned on me the other day, I told my wife the other day that the grunge station on Sirius is to me what classic rock stations were to my dad.
Right.
And that made me feel really old. But at the same time, very happy that it exists, because I want my own classic rock stations. Give me my high school years, please.
Right.
So I don't know. I will see the movie because Andy buys everything and he gives me his Blu-ray codes. So I will get to see it for free. And I will watch it at some point. But
so one thing I didn't care too much about is how Thomas Wayne was portrayed in this movie.
I feel like that's through the lens of this story.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think it's like this is a story of the villain. He is going to be perceived that way.
Did you see the picture that says "Love Your Beautiful Smile" TW that she has? Re-throwing in whether or not. Yeah, there's a scene with a picture that she has a picture of her and Thomas Wayne, and it says "Love Your Beautiful Smile" TW. So confusing the issue of whether or not that's Batman's half brother.
I don't need any of that in there.
I know.
Yeah, their origins don't have to be tied together, and they probably Batman and Joker's origins shouldn't
freaking
be.
tired of that.
Yeah. I did like.
It was always my biggest complaint with the '89 Batman.
Right.
Like, I don't need these two. Dude, how lazy is that?
Yeah.
Oh, see, he killed him. It's like Norman Osborn killing Uncle Ben. Like, I don't need that level of connection between the hero and the villain.
You know, bad guys can just be the bad guy.
There's more than one bad guy.
Right.
It's okay.
And it's a hero.
Correct.
He's supposed to stop bad guys, regardless of whether or not he has a personal stake in it.
That's always been my biggest problem, actually, with Batman as a character. On a side digression, the idea that when the people are like, oh, well, he does this because he can never catch his parents' killer. That implies that Batman would stop if he could catch his parents' killer.
Yeah.
That's what I like about the 70s version, where at least at one point he did. And he was like, no, this is awesome. I'm going to keep doing this. It doesn't make Batman a hero if he's doing it because he's an angry child.
Right. I did like the younger Bruce Wayne in this. I think it's one of the good things they did on Gotham is it takes away the argument of these guys are all inspired by Batman. You know, I like it better where it's like Gotham is just a crazy town where this started happening, and so he responded in this way.
You're saying he's the hero that they need.
He is.
And then, well, of course, you know, there are several scenes in this movie where Joker is just delusional and he's imagining things that are happening. Like
I called that early.
Yeah, so like the relationship. He has
No
a
way,
relationship
the crazy
with his,
guy's crazy.
Yeah, the relationship.
Exactly.
The ugly guy gets the hot neighbor. You know, that's just, you know, it was pretty. You know, that was pretty obvious. You know, early on.
With the. Hey, were you following me today?
Yeah.
Yes, and that you just gloss over that? Red flag right there.
It also
but he might have imagined that part of it too. So now we don't know exactly how much of it was imagined and how much of it wasn't.
As a guy with an English degree, I love the unreliable narrator. It's one of my favorite cliches in lit is when you have to ask yourself if what you're reading is being whatever you're reading is being narrated to you is actually happening at all, or if it is happening, is it happening in the manner in which you're being told?
Right.
It's a great. I mean, it's why Lolita is so good, right? Like so many things are. It is like Lolita is a classic.
Haven't read it. So.
What's a classic example of unreliable narrator? Right. It is like you have to. The story is told in between the lines of the book. So, but it's a long tradition. So I think that's awesome to put that in a movie. I'm just sort of thrown that it's a giant ripoff of King of Comedy and. I mean, it's have you seen the King of Comedy?
I know that there's a reference to it, but I always took
it's not a reference. It's the same plot,
right? And then that between that and a little bit of Taxi Driver and a little bit of just
I get it.
Yeah,
Scorsese made movies.
Yeah,
yeah. Thanks. I'll go watch those.
He doesn't like what's being made now. I'll tell you that.
No, oh my God. And Francis Ford Coppola, the guy who gave us Godfather 3 is going to condescend. Shut up. Oh, they just beat the same story. Godfather 3.
Yeah. I will say I love Phoenix's performance up to the point
he'll get an Oscar.
to where he is now, like, officially this is Joker.
Right.
I feel like there was really a decline in the performance after that. I think he's there for the downward spiral, becoming this character. Once it's there, I'm less impressed by what's going on. A lot of this is happening around him. Yeah. This big revolution. He didn't orchestrate this.
No.
It just happened around him.
Well, and I think that's part of the character. Is he does something that creates chaos. He doesn't have to. Joker doesn't have to be the one who. Yeah, he doesn't.
If this were a traditional Joker story, this would have been something that he put in motion.
In a narrative sense, that's bad writing.
Yeah.
If the story, if it's not a narrative, if things just happen.
Yeah.
Why did it happen? I don't know. Because they do. Because they need to advance the plot. That's bad writing. Like, that is literally why so many of DC's movies are bad. It's why Aquaman is bad. It's why Suicide Squad is bad. Things just happen because this needs to happen to move them along to the next thing that happens. There's no cause and effect. It's just some things that happen and they're in a linear order roughly.
Yeah, and it doesn't ruin the movie or anything like that, but it weakens it, I think, there at the end.
And I didn't feel like it was bad writing. I just felt like there are certain things that the Joker caused by the, killing the guys in the subway, but there were also things that created him just because of the nature of the events that were occurring around him.
Right. But I mean, he's the focus of this. It's his movie.
Yeah.
That's my thing with it,
But it's I don't think it's one that is intended.
This is from the guy who gave us Old School and The Hangover. It ain't Scorsese, right? I want to point out, he directed and wrote a movie where Luke Wilson sleeps with a high school girl. Thing that happened and is now super weird to watch as a 40-year-old. Seemed real funny when I was 19. Now I'm like, that's weird. I can't believe that made it through to the movies. Like, Todd Phillips has got an odd sense of humor and appropriateness about him.
Well, I don't know too much about him as an individual, so... but I was overall pretty pleased with the film.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. But again, it's not something I'm going to see again. It's nice to have this Joker movie, and it's also, initially this was just going to be a one and done type of thing, but this movie is making so much more money than what it cost to produce.
Yeah. Every time somebody says, we talked about this with Watchmen, again to segue Sam.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about something being one and done until there's
money in their pocket, and
I don't know. I don't need another one of these without a Batman.
No, I don't either.
I don't need another solo.
I don't want Joker
movie.
2, and we need to have, and Batman needs to come around and put Joker in his place.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of guy that the good guys need to ultimately win out in the end. You don't need to keep telling stories where the bad guy wins or the bad guy, just because you have the people who will take that as, some type of hero worship. So.
Right. There's no after credits or anything, but I did stick around through the credits because I wanted to see what comic creators were credited on here. Of course, we have Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson is on there. Brian Boland is.
And no Alan Moore.
Alan Moore is not.
Well, he's not credited. Once again,
yeah,
it's a segue.
Exactly.
He ain't credited in Watchmen either.
He's not credited in anything anymore like this.
That was Lindelof said that in Watchmen, that was the most he could do to respect Alan Moore was respect his wishes that he not be mentioned in any way in it. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's his creations. If that's how he wants it, that's fine. That's, understandable, and you should respect that. But again, this whole concept of, Joker trying to be a stand-up comedian, that's directly from The Killing Joke. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There are definitely elements of that in this movie.
And I thought they made some choices to pull from some good material. So.
Yeah. I think there are some things from this movie that we'll see in the comics in the next couple of years. I think the thing of it's an uncontrollable laugh, that's too good an idea not to pick up in the books at some point. As much as they adopt from movies and TV shows, and the books, I feel like there's definitely some things from here that'll work its way in.
We're going to see ha-ha-ha's just randomly in panels, whether they need to be there or not.
That's probably possible.
Yeah. Just some things like that. My thing was, too, that I thought what they were foreshadowing is he has this nervous tick that he does where he just laughs uncontrollably like that, and then he hands someone at one part he hands someone a card saying, "I have a condition, I have uncontrollable laugh." He says, "I have a card." That's his explanation. I was waiting at the end of the movie for him to just tell someone, "I have a card," and hand them a Joker card.
Yeah, that does feel like that was telegraphed.
It never happened, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm a hack writer.
No,
I don't know. But
that feels too there to
right.
That pitch is hanging over the plate.
Yeah,
you got to swing at it.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I gave it a very fine. Like I said, I really liked it. I'm not gonna go see it again, but I enjoyed it. So
Yeah, I'll go very fine with it too. Again, kind of stick the landing a little better. I'd probably go near mint with it, but yeah, it's worth seeing. It's a good story. This is not a superhero movie you show your children, your little kids. But again, if I was in high school, I probably would have watched this. You know, me and my buddies would have went and seen it. You know, that kind of thing. But yeah, again, and I don't need another one necessarily.
You're going to get another one.
Yeah.
But as long as they don't bring this forward and try to mesh all of this into the broader DCU of movies, if such a thing even really exists right now.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it
I
does.
just slid my phone across the table to Dan because today's breaking news is that there are going to be a lot of DC-related live-action movies and TV shows coming to HBO Max, basically turning HBO Max into a really, really expensive version of Disney Plus. Because Disney Plus is $5 and HBO Max is going to be at least 20. So, because HBO Now is 15,
Yeah,
they're not going to
exactly.
give you unless they drop the price in HBO Now. I don't see that happening. I would think they're just going to jack the price
HBO's
on Max.
always, you know, kept their perceived value thing up.
Yeah. So, so we'll see. I don't think there's such a thing as a cinematic DC universe at this point because I think it's still really. It's still really being baked.
The way they tried to shoehorn everything together, I'm fine with that.
Well, they went straight to Avengers on the first drop, basically, and Marvel built to that over half dozen movies before they got there.
They made the mistake of trying to play catch up instead of just taking the time to build it up.
Right, and dragging their feet to begin with when they could have done this back in the 90s.
I have an analogy, but it ain't appropriate for this podcast.
So after 3 or 4 segue attempts into Watchmen,
well, I was just throwing out there that the two things bleed really well one to the other.
Yeah.
But I'm the only one that's watched both episodes of HBO's Watchmen, but they both watched the first
episode.
So we can talk about episode 1.
Only
and then
episode 1.
And then I will bite my tongue at the silly things they say that don't make sense. Because that's what happened before the podcast started when they were saying something couldn't be, and I just went, and rocked back and forth in my chair.
Yeah.
So I'll let you guys go ahead.
Well, I got to pull up the cast list because I cannot remember the main actress's name.
Regina King?
Regina King, thank you. So now I had one of those moments again where I'm watching this show and it's like, how do I know this? How do I know her?
Well, I'm glad
What
you did
have
that
I
because
seen
I
her
keep
in?
meaning to do that every episode. I looked up her husband, who is Black Manta in Aquaman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well-
Because I was like, I've seen that guy. He's in a super movie.
Yeah,
what the heck was he in?
He's been in something else too where he was really
Yeah,
good.
but
I can't
that's
think
the
of it
thing that
either.
I know I was thinking of. And I when I looked, I had seen him in a couple of things, but I kept thinking superhero movie. Who the
Yeah,
heck was he in a
he's Black
superhero
Manta.
movie? And it was because I hate that movie. That's why I didn't remember it.
But she
It's like,
was
oh, I blocked
she
it
was
out.
the HR director on The Big Bang Theory. So that's the thing that
okay.
I had recognized. So
I don't watch the show, but that makes a lot of sense.
I'm glad that show's over.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that was a major role shift for her to be the secondary character in the show, and now to be the primary mover in this series. And she was outstanding in this show.
Great.
She's really good. So, but
and look, it has to be said that it is sadly a very ballsy move for them to make not only a woman, but a woman of color be the lead character in what is still a middle-aged white guy's playground. And Watchmen is a story almost entirely about middle-aged white guys, I might add, too.
Yeah.
So the sequel to a story about middle-aged white guys and a thing that is beloved by middle-aged white guys, it is depressing that constitutes as ballsy, but it is. And I have to give them a lot of credit for saying she's right and the story is good and we're doing it and we don't care what you think because it's really good. And I think you're going to like her performance just as well in episode 2 as you did in episode 1.
because she was awesome.
Yeah,
in
she's
episode
really great.
1.
And
So yeah.
So you're going to get a lot more Louis Gossett in 2 than you did in 1.
And that was another. I didn't realize who that was. I mean, it's like okay, I should know who that is.
I had to explain to my nephew when he watched us that like he's never seen a movie with Louis Gossett in it.
yeah.
And I was like, he was a big friggin' deal at one point, and rattling off all the things I'd seen him in as a kid.
Yeah, he was like, it was sort of familiar when I saw him, but then again, I saw him in the credits. I'm like, oh, okay.
The same
But
way
it's
that
been so long since I've seen him in something.
the same way
you
that in the
know.
90s, like Denzel Washington was the go-to black guy for movies.
Right.
Because you'd be like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah, he's great. Louis Gossett was the go-to black
yeah.
guy in the 70s and into the 80s. He's in so many movies with so many big name people that like if you're of a certain age like we are, you're like, I've seen him in like a million
Iron
things.
Eagle, son.
That's what I was going to say, but nothing stands out like Iron Eagle. Yeah. Was he an Enemy of Mine too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It was like,
yeah.
that's the other thing I know him from,
Yeah,
right?
he was the alien. Yep.
Yeah.
So, Now, okay, one thing about the TV series is that it follows the comic book series. It does not follow the movie.
It follows the comic as canon, and it also completely disregards Doomsday Clock.
Yeah,
Doomsday
so
Clock has nothing to do with this, and probably nothing to do with the DC universe.
Right.
But we're going to find out on December 18th.
Yes, there you go.
But it does treat the events of the comic as all having definitely happened.
Right.
What that means, and this is important, is that if you only watch the movie, there is a scene in episode 1 that doesn't make a lick of sense to you.
Right.
And if you've read the comics, you know exactly what that is. Fun side story. My wife insisted the entire time building up to this that she had read Watchmen. And I kept saying, baby, you have not. Because I tried to get you to, and you didn't. And she's like, no, I've read it. I've read it. And she would rattle things off. And I told her, I said, what I think happened is I know we've seen the movie. I think you've been around me for 20 years. You're familiar with a lot of these characters by name and look. You know who Rorschach and Dr. Manhattan are. And you've seen the movie. So in your head, you've blended these two things together. And you think, and then the squids fell out of the sky. And I was like, that's awesome. And I looked across the couch and she had a perplexed look and I paused it and she goes, what? And I said, isn't this great? And I smiled and she goes, what? And I said, well, you know, and I held my hand out like, there it is. And she goes, and there was a big sigh. And I said, because of course you've read the comics. So of course you know how this ties to the ending. And she goes, I just don't remember it. And I said, that is a lie. Because if there's one thing you would remember.
She does not remember it because she never read it.
Exactly. I said that is a lie because if there's one thing you would remember from that comic if you had read it, it is the very beginning. And if there are two things you would remember, it's the very end. I'm like, so no, there's no way you didn't. And then she wouldn't let me explain it to her. She's like, fine, I'll read it. Maybe I didn't read them. And she's like, maybe I did see the movie. And I'm like, I told you that. So that's been happening at work to me too. My friends at work who all know I'm a comic guy have texted me and been like, Watchmen's so good. I'm like, did you read the comics? I think I did. I'm like, did the squid scene make sense to you? Not even a little. You didn't. You didn't read it.
Exactly.
And like for the movie, I actually felt like the ending of the movie made more sense for the movie.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's not better, but it's an easier sell in a Hollywood movie.
And that's less setup you have to do in the movie
also,
too, which you have time for in the comics.
Also, it has to be said, lower special effects budget.
Yeah,
you didn't have to make the big squid thing destroys New York City. It didn't have to happen.
No, yeah. So, but yeah. So anyway, I liked all the Easter eggs in the first episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think, and I only saw this one time, and I just for some reason noticed. I swear that she punched in her code to go into her secret room was 1985.
Oh, 1985.
I think it was well, or anyway, that's like the
year.
Ooh,
now I'm gonna look again. Yeah, it's 85, 86.
And so I need to double check that. I didn't go and double check that.
Really cool.
The final scene of the first episode where you've got the badge on the ground, and you got the little drop of blood,
and it does the camera pan kind of the same way that the camera in the comics pans across the buildings and down to the button. I thought that was a really cool homage. Yeah. And just the little things like the Dr. Manhattan on Mars in the background of the TV.
Yeah. And and of course, he's destroying his home there on Mars.
Making stuff and just tearing it down, just randomly doing things.
So, well, before we started recording, one of the things we were talking about was, we have some characters here who are Jeremy Irons. They don't say who Jeremy Irons is. We have Don Johnson.
Now,
they don't say who Don Johnson is.
IMDb says Adrian Veidt / Ozymandias. Now, that didn't mean anything because it didn't say Khan on Star Trek Into Darkness either. It had a different name, and that was Khan, right? So you can do that. The IMDb has been used as a fake out on people before. Yeah. So maybe.
So at this point, having only seen episode 1, I had been assuming that Jeremy Irons was Ozymandias. So now Matt is hinting to us without just coming out and saying it that
I think one of two things is happening. I have a friend who is
or you think?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm 51-49 on these things. Whether or not Jeremy Irons and the quite clearly not real people that serve him,
right?
Whether they are, some people believe that Irons is actually Manhattan. Okay. And that this is all life he has created, and he is basically trying to humanize himself by aping what he thinks Ozymandias would be doing. Because Ozymandias, the newspaper says, is dead.
Right.
He's been officially declared dead. The other theory is that Ozymandias is himself, and that he is on Mars with Manhattan and can't get back home, and his only companionship is these series of, fake people, and he's going crazy with cabin fever, trapped on Mars, and can't go back and be a rich playboy. So you do get some answers about the about the servants, about Mr. Phillips and Miss, I can't remember her name.
I don't remember the name.
Amazing.
No, that'd be a fun crossover. Netflix and HBO teaming up.
Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Somebody on Amazon, HBO. Boy, it would make all of Rorschach's diatribes would be very different. All the filth of the city would be very different in Ms. Maisel. But you do get some answers about his servants in episode 2.
Okay. Don't go there.
Which I
yet.
don't
Yeah,
want to spoil for you
I
guys.
Don't go there.
Because
Don't go
some
there.
people didn't do their homework.
Hey, we said first episode.
Well, remember when we started, I had said I was going to wait and watch like the first 2 or 3 episodes and binge them all together. Then all of a sudden, like, ooh, let's talk about the first episode on the podcast. It's like, ah!
Well, I mean, if we're being timely, I feel like we have to.
okay.
Having said that, I have hit up multiple people who should know better, Andy, and several others who have said, "Did you watch it last night?" And they said things like, "No, I watched football." And I'm like, "What is wrong with you?
Priorities.
You were a comic person. You watch a crappy Sunday night football game instead of the season premiere of Watchmen. Get out."
So, but
I don't want to gatekeep anybody, but again, get out.
So Jeremy Irons' character, I'm still leaning towards Ozymandias. I'm probably wrong.
So when I said 51-49, my 51 is it is him. He's on Mars. He's going crazy. My 49 is it's all Manhattan.
Okay.
That was where I was in episode 1. I'm a little more the other way after episode 2, and you'll see why.
Okay. Now, is Don Johnson Night Owl?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
and
either.
I mean,
again,
because he had
season
the
2
vehicle, right? So he had
Well,
the vehicle.
No, they
I-
all have those.
yeah,
it
I-
implies that that's just like
Well,
a thing.
but that's the only one we see.
In the first
In the
episode,
first episode,
is,
that's the only one we
I
see.
take that more as opposed to a militarization of the police force as
Yeah.
we've gotten in the real world.
So let me
We've got a superheroization
let me just
of the police force.
let me just stop before Scott embarrasses himself further.
Hey,
There's
you know what?
No,
I am
having
I am
only
this
seen
is-
having only
yes.
seen one.
First episode.
I am 99.9% certain that he's not Night Owl. If it turned out he was Night Owl, it is so out of left field and so
Really?
weird.
Because wasn't there an owl
Multiple-
mug on his desk?
She's drinking out of an
Yeah,
owl mug.
okay,
which I
so-
thought was just a fun gag.
Okay, all right. So now, because then that
Maybe-
implies that his wife, who
No, it's
never,
not.
it's-
No.
okay, they
Lord-
never named. Did they name her? Did they give her name?
Silk Spectre is in
I
it.
can't
She's
remember.
Jean Smart's character that you've seen in the previews. She's the FBI agent that says Lori Blake. That is Silk Spectre.
It's not in this episode.
She's going to be in episode 3. I thought she was going to be in 2 because she's on the thing that says in the weeks to come.
Yeah.
She's in episode 2's next week on Watchmen. She shows up.
Okay.
That is
See, the only trailer that I saw for this was where you basically had the masked police and the Rorschach faces, and I didn't see any later trailers about this.
his wife is not.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering. It's like that could explain
Right.
because
Yeah.
I was going to comment. We don't see Silk Spectre at all.
Right.
No,
In this
and
one.
she's
So-
that's confirmed to be her. Jean
Okay.
Smart's character is her. It's Lori Blake instead of Lori. Was it like Juice Besic or something Polish? She took comedian's last name when she found out that that's her dad.
Oh, okay.
So that is confirmed to be her. that's like her. That's her secret identity, I guess. So she changes her name so as to like slide out and do something else. But she's working for the government, which means that, which is kind of fun, right? Because she's sort of turned into her dad. Because she's in a time there are no superheroes.
Girls
She's
is-
one of the sanctioned ones because she works for the government. So I think that's going to be a fun twist. But she's not in episode 2 either. But
Okay.
she's in the teaser at the end.
We got the whole, in the Watchmen story, what Redford was going to run for president.
Yeah,
Now Redford's
yeah.
been president for
30
30
years.
years. Which that's actually in Doomsday Clock
Yeah,
as well.
that's what I was
so
thinking.
yeah.
Yep.
So but that was actually pulled from the book.
Has he signed off on that?
Who?
Robert Redford?
He must have. They
just
have
use
his picture.
name?
Yeah, they
Right,
use his picture
They
in
have
episode 1.
to, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I assume that he must have just thought, yeah, sure, that's funny.
Yeah.
Why
And let it go.
not? Yeah.
He's not portrayed as a bad guy.
Yeah, no.
He just
I mean,
he just said
he
he's
is a
president.
polarizing president, but he's a very progressive president
Yeah.
and seems very, like, it would be in line with Redford's own politics to a
Yeah.
degree. It's not like they made him a white supremacist or
Right,
something. He was like, I'm not
exactly.
putting my name on that.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like, yeah, I'd be okay with that being grown-up president me, sure.
He's probably, how much on Captain America?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we do have we've actually kind of skirted a whole lot of things, but I mean this whole series starts off on a race incident. So we have the Tulsa riots from 1921.
1927,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Real thing that happened.
Real thing that happened.
Thing
right?
to remember when people tell you that they're going to make America great again. They tell you America used to be great. Just remember. Also, important to remember that actual story of a thing that actually happened was buried by the government and journalists
for, I believe, 30 or 40 years at
long,
least.
I thought it was until the 70s or 80s.
That's what I'm saying. It was at least
Yeah,
the
that's for a long-
60s.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe it was the 50s and I'm crazy, but I thought it was either
Long
it's
time.
late. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
Well, and
I wasn't that far from being born when people really research this. And you'd think that what you see in the first episode is an exaggeration, but they legitimately did have planes that strafed and shot black folks in the street and dropped bombs. That's a thing that happened.
Okay, now I did do a little bit of research on that too. Now there are various reports on what actually happened. So some people suggested that there were planes, but it was probably more of the dropping like a Molotov cocktail type of a situation. I doubt they have a.
Well, you don't see like a squadron of them. There's
Right,
one
yeah,
that goes
yeah,
over.
there's one
But
that
that's the
goes
part that's
over,
like,
but yeah.
that seems implausible. No, it's not.
That's and there are reports that actually happened. Of course, there's variations on the number of people that were killed.
Which turns out that's what happens when somebody buries a story because
Exactly.
it's embarrassing
Well,
for,
and now
60,
most of
70
the
years.
most of the people who were around for that event have passed on, so you can't.
There is more in episode 2 about what that little kid that gets his ass kicked. The kid who says red predations. There is some explanation of what the red predations are in episode 2, and this is a mildest of spoilers for you.
I'm aware of the reparation type thing.
It is.
So
It
there
is
was a
people who were
reparation.
descendants or survivors of the Tulsa massacre.
So they actually get a dollar amount from the government as reparations for what occurred. Now, of course, symbols from our past are never co-opted for anything ever.
Right.
That's sarcasm. So one thing that did kind of bother me a little bit was, and I think we might have some disagreements on this, but that the white supremacists co-opted Rorschach's appearance as their symbol.
That's not really that crazy. He sent his journal to a right-wing nut
Yeah,
job.
that's the thing, because that's where the journal ended up. That's why that's the straight line to this, I think.
Well,
but ultimately, that's the only. That's how in this particular storyline, people know what the truth is, though, is from Rorschach sending his journal, and somebody, the only people in the world who would publish it,
But they don't.
finally publish. Well,
They don't know that because they actually it's a coup conspiracy theory that the government faked the squid attack in New York. No one knows that. They don't believe that.
That's true, because I
Yeah.
guess what I'm doing is I'm taking some stuff from Doomsday Clock, where
Right.
Doomsday
Which
Clock,
is hard.
yes.
It's hard
it's
to
hard-
separate
yeah,
that
yeah,
because
okay.
Doomsday Clock is so fresh in your mind. I did the exact same thing.
So you don't think then that that's been revealed here in the Watchmen TV series?
No.
See, I was operating.
I
on the
think the
assumption that
world
it
still
was.
believes that actually happened.
Okay, and I guess it makes sense because the fact that they still have squid falling from the sky means
So
that
the
somebody's
the question about the squid from
continuing
the sky.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
The question about the squid from the sky is that there's 3 ways it can go, right? That's a natural, unintended consequence of the actual squid
Right.
monster Manhattan man Ozymandias made. That's just like, oh man, we've screwed the environment up. This thing happens now. Or it's a thing that Manhattan and or Ozymandias have continued to
Continue to do.
perpetuate. Or it's a thing the government has. So like maybe someone knows, and I think it's probably more likely that it's number 2. But that's just because I don't believe that side digression. I'm not a government conspiracy theorist because, first of all, to believe government conspiracy theories, you have to believe the government is, they're all predicated on the idea that the government is competent.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
secondly, that the thing the government is really competent at doing is keeping secrets.
and which they are not.
Which they are not.
Right.
So if there really were a government conspiracy to drop squids from the sky, because no one's going to go home and tell their wife, I dropped a bunch of squids, that's all fake, babe.
Right.
Like, that's how I know that Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy, because
Yeah.
someone would have said
Said something
something.
by now, yeah.
So like it's not that's silly, but it's very possible and very plausible that an industrialist and basically a demigod could continue
that, yeah.
the
Right.
charade and keep the government in the shadows about that. That's very plausible to me, within the bounds of what's plausible in a superhero universe.
Right, yeah. And I thought it was kind of weird to have the police force wearing masks.
Yeah.
Because to me, most of the time when you see police force wearing masks, that's a very, very, very bad thing.
Well, wait until episode 2.
Oh, okay. But we also get some backstory about there was an event that caused this to happen whenever there was this mass attack.
Episode 2
on the
got a
police
lot of
force.
criticism from online about how people felt that it was so rah-rah pro-police at a time that, Black Lives Matters and a lot of other criminal justice reform things are not necessarily anti-police, but are very critical of the police, let's say. And episode 2 ain't that. So the police are not sterling superheroes in episode 2, and I think I wouldn't say they're perfect in episode 1, but they're definitely portrayed to be the good guys. Right. And episode 2 cocks that on its ear a little bit. which is what I want. I mean, I like the idea. So, the point of Watchmen is that a black and white, always this, always that solution doesn't work, and that morally gray is the way things get done. That's why Rorschach's dead, because Rorschach believes in absolute values of things, right? So I think episode 2 does a nice job of that.
And that to me, I guess if I have one bigger disappointment is whenever I saw the previews and I saw the masked police versus Rorschach, I took this as this was going to be a battle in ideologies where one group is covering the truth and one group is trying to reveal the truth.
I think they're both wrong.
And what we end up with is actually they have nothing to do with directly with the events that occurred in Watchmen.
And that whole
it's a race thing.
That whole first scene where you see the cop and the Rorschach is such a really great, uncomfortable inversion of modern America, where the white guy gets pulled over by the black cop and has his hands at 10 and 2 and is narrating what he's going to do and is basically being threatened by the cop. But then, of course, the cop is not the bad guy either. And so, that scene doubles back on itself so many times where you're like, wait, am I supposed to feel sorry for the hillbilly? And that feels weird.
It's like, who is going to be the bad guy in this scene?
It's like,
we
that's
don't
very
know.
odd in 2019 to have the redneck be the good guy and the black cop is the bad guy. But then you're like, oh, no, I was right the first time. I was right. the cop is the good guy.
Really
but even though the cop is the good guy, he also feels weird in 2019.
Yeah, exactly.
They did a really nice job of making you feel really uncomfortable the whole way. Like, I don't know where this is going, and I don't know how I feel about this.
I like that the cop's gun is locked.
Because that feels like a completely plausible thing that could happen in the near future of remote locking of weapons. Honestly, it's not a terrible idea a lot of the times. It's a terrible idea in this situation, and that's why it's a bad idea. But you can see where somebody would say, if that had happened, these things wouldn't have happened. And you can see where people would go for it and be like, we should lock their guns until we get permission. But then this is what happens because there's a reason they carry guns. Because bad guys have guns too. So it's such a weird, that was the scene that to me, I watched the opening and I was like, yep, I know this is all real. Where are we going? And then the pullover scene happens and there's do you consent to being recorded? And he's recording this time of why I pulled you over. And I was like, oh man, this is
automatically be on the recording.
Yeah.
The time.
So that's a great way to segue into what you and I were talking about earlier and I think mentioned on the actual recording. The tech of this world is odd, right?
Yeah. Electric cars were from the series.
Right.
Like there are electric cars in the Watchmen comic.
Right.
So those are there. But
they
then
still
they've got
have beepers.
a huge beeper.
Yeah.
Like an industrial.
Yeah, they've got I was a doctor in 1994 kind of beepers stuff, right? Yeah. It's weird. And then there's hovercraft police vehicles.
Based on
but
the
they
owl
still
ship,
have beepers.
So you are seeing the influence of superheroes on this world and
it is
technology.
Possible, I will say, in its defense of the beepers, it is possible that the only people who have those are the people who are secretly cops and or secretly superheroes and cops, and they have it to avoid the same way. If you ever watch The Wire, that's part of The Wire. They use beepers because they can't be monitored the same way cell phones can.
I could see that.
So
makes sense.
maybe that's what it is.
But it is a funny throwback thing for the show.
They do explain a lot of things in 2 that I hoped they would explain after I watched 1.
Right,
like why does Cal and Sister Knight have 3 white children? And because at first I thought it was just like isn't this shocking? Aren't you shocked? And it was never going to be explained. I don't need to be shocked by this. It doesn't bother me. No. But I thought, it felt like a lot of things the first episode were did that just mess with your preconceived notions, man? But in episode 2, I was like, well, I hope there's a narrative reason for this in some way. And there is an expressed narrative reason, and then there is an implied narrative reason too. And it was really well done. I don't have any problem with it. I want to be honest. But I was like, I feel condescended to that they were like, that just shocked you, didn't it? Like, dude, I'm not 15. Don't give me that crap.
Of all the things I noticed, I never even thought twice about that.
Because Scott doesn't see color.
I'm just kidding. But it just there were so many other things that just drew my attention in this. It's just oh my gosh, I need to see this 15 times.
Given that it's Damon Lindelof, who I don't have a ton of respect for, I was very skeptical of episode 1. So I was I wouldn't say I'm like hyper aware of it, but I was very much looking for there to be eye roll moments because I think he's kind of a hack, if I'm being honest. I will revise my opinion based on how far this has been good, I have to say, but my opinion's based on him and Lost is I think he's kind of a hack. So I was very much ready to hate this. So if there were hacky shock value moments, I was looking to see them, and I was cautiously happy about it. I think that the biracial children parent thing fits in with what the story they're trying to tell about race and power. I'm fine with all that, but I was hoping for there to be a narrative reason rather than something. I don't like
just have it there because
I don't like
there.
anytime anything exists solely for the shock value because I'm freaking hard to shock. So you've wasted your time. Like give me more narrative, give me less shock value. So and then you get it, and it's really good. And I was like, it's part of what made me like episode 2 so much was they very deftly weave in multi-layered stories. And I'm trying really hard to not give spoilers away to you guys, and it's really struggling.
Well, that's one of the things I'm enjoying, I've enjoyed about the first episode. It's like, okay, it was so good. Even if I don't have as many wow moments in the second episode, as long as they continue the story and move it at a great pace, and it moves in a very, I don't know, just it's exciting. You keep using the word narrative, so now I just have narrative struck to my mind. So they move the narrative forward, and if it's even 75% of what we got from the first episode, the rest of the 9 episodes, man, this is going to be one of the best series I've ever watched.
We talked about this before we started recording. It is ostensibly a single season show, and we all kind of called shenanigans on that because we think this is going to have done so well for HBO that there's no way they don't back a truck full of money up to Lindelof's house and go, "You got another one in you?" But I think what I'm hoping that when they say it's a single season show, they mean that this is one season telling the story of whatever is going on with Sister Night and Red Scare and Looking Glass and all those things, and that has an A to B. It's done, and then I don't care if season 2 is totally unrelated. I don't care if season 2 brings some people back as cameos. I don't care if season 2 brings nobody back. It's all good. They can do whatever they want to do for season 2.
Season 2 can be a story from
we
Seattle.
get an A to B story, and then season 2 is another story in the world. Totally fine with that.
Season 3, how do people in Berlin view what's going on in the United States? As
long
as it's a great
what's
story,
it like in
that's what
Russia
we want.
these
There you
days,
go.
kind of thing. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Speaking of which, I like the tracksuit vigilante. Which that's reminded me of the Hawkeye.
Someone
series,
says something in this one about something about you're somebody calls him something and he says, "I'm a communist."
Yeah,
that was
Red.
great.
And there. Well, speaking of Hawkeye, he played a character called Hawkeye on Deadwood.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did we mention that Dave Gibbons gets a credit, but Alan Moore did not get a credit, which that's his normal
That's
normal
par for
mode
the
of
course
operation.
now.
So, but he was also an executive producer or something.
I think that was more of a
There's an honorarium.
Well, probably a legal thing
And-
too.
and
on some
well,
level.
no, I don't think it is.
And
You don't think so?
probably a financial.
DC owns it.
Yeah.
I as I understand it, it was a, "Hey, Mr. Gibbons, would you like some money?"
Right,
kind of thing.
yeah.
Now, I'm sure he was consulted for, "Do you feel that we're being
Right.
truthful?"
Yeah.
Like, so look at. I saw somebody say this on Twitter the other day, and I agree that someone quote tweeted somebody else's thing where they said, Dave Gibbons drew Alan Moore's Watchmen. That ain't how it works, man.
No.
Like, it does work that way sometimes, right? Sometimes it's, "Here, monkey, draw these pages the way I say."
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way all the time. And Watchmen was, look, it's probably predominantly Alan Moore's story, but Dave Gibbons had a lot of influence on the look and the feel. And, I don't want to be a snot about it, but I guess I will be. One of the things that's remarkable and memorable about Watchmen is the slavish loyalty to the 9-panel grid. And that was Dave Gibbons. Dave Gibbons wanted the 9-panel grid, and it's because it used to be a thing, right? And it wasn't by the time they put that out. And he did it as a throwback and as it felt unique in 1985 and 86, and it still feels super unique now. So that's really forward thinking of Gibbons to be like, "It ain't coming back, you guys." Like, it's only going to get more relevant as time goes on. So I'm 100% fine with him consulting Dave Gibbons.
Yeah.
It's not like he's the guy who drew it and that's all he did. Like, it's a token pat on the back. "Here you go, Mr. Gibbons. Is this cool with you?" Well, he had a lot of narrative input in Watchmen.
And plus, it puts money in his pocket, so that's good.
Also very happy about that.
While we're talking about people not getting credit, I did find an interview not too long ago with John Higgins, the colorist of Watchmen, who, as far as people that don't get credit for this story, like the secondary
that
color
faded
palette,
look of Watchmen is a huge part of. It's why the Zack Snyder version sucks. It's all of that grainy,
Yeah.
everything's brown and gray Zack Snyder thing. It doesn't look like. Why do you like watching?
I love the Snyder Watchmen movie. Absolutely love it.
I think it is
Because I think it's almost, with the exception of the end, is basically almost like a panel for panel recreation.
I think it is like it is where I will stand on my people don't get satire. It is like a dumb kid did a nice version of that thing. It is so Watchmen has like the A plot, the B plot, the C plot, right, in the comics, and the Watchmen movie is a perfectly serviceable version of the A plot. Right. But that ain't Watchmen either.
Well, but I mean, what
Watchmen's
can you get
more
in a
than
movie?
just the A plot.
Yeah, but what can you get in a movie in that time frame?
That's why I wouldn't have made a 3-hour movie that only did 1/3 of the thing. Like that's what made me so happy when they announced a Watchmen show. I was like, oh cool, we're gonna get like the full version. No, but this is pretty good. And I don't hate the Zack Snyder version. It's just a dumb version of Watchmen.
But that's why we're seeing so many successful comic book TV shows now, because you could take the time like you can with a sequential,
that movie is about superheroes punching shit in slow motion, and that's not what Watchmen the comic book is. It's not a superhero story, which is why it's such a weird thing. People are like, oh, it's the greatest superhero story ever told. It's not, though. Like, it's predicated on you understanding a lot of things about superhero comics. So that's actually where the TV show is weird too, right? The TV show really does a great job of skirting the line.
Well, my thing too, again, just having seen the first episode, I haven't seen the second. As I watch this, I'm like, does this need to be a Watchmen show?
I know.
It's like I feel like you could just make a new superhero show.
It's done a great job of skirting a line between you must have read the comics or it must be new reader friendly. Everybody I know that didn't read the comics got the show. And they knew they missed something with the squid,
right?
But they didn't feel lost, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it's like if you,
it's like you're supposed to feel confused at that point.
Right. It's when I say, and I think I've talked about this before. It sounds like a digression, but I promise it's not. I love Christopher Priest's Deathstroke, because if you read every single issue, it is a very rich and very deep and very complicated story. But if you rando picked an issue of it up, you'd understand what was going on. You'd definitely feel like you'd miss something, and you'd want to go read it. But that's the way comics used to be made, right? So like that's the way the first episode felt like. If you didn't get it, you probably want to go read Watchmen right now, because you're like, I bet I missed something there. Yeah. The same way that people were with Game of Thrones when the show came on, and they're like, I want to read those books now because I think there was something there that I didn't quite get. And if you don't want to do it, it's totally okay. It stands alone. It's just enriched by you having gone back and read it.
Well, it's funny because like you talk about Game of Thrones specifically, and like after the first season, it's like, you know what? I wonder if I missed something. So I went back and got the audiobook and listened to the whole thing. You know what? At the end, I decided, you know what?
Not as much as you might think.
I didn't miss anything.
But
so I didn't read any of the rest of the books. Now I'm sure, and I understand. But you get later on, there's lots and lots more changes.
They do diverge as they go. But I also think, I don't know. I remember when the show first started, and I'd read the books a long time before the show, and back in 99, 2000 or something, I started reading right before the third book came out. And I remember people were like, I got to read these books. And I was like, kind of, I guess. But I feel the same way about Lord of the Rings. Like, I don't know, the Lord of the Rings movies, honestly, is kind of a better version than the book.
Well, see, the Two Towers is a terrible adaptation of the Two Towers book. It's awful.
That's what I think is better. I think the Two Towers is the worst book. All the fun stuff's up front, and then the last half is just walking. You know what they're doing when you meet Frodo and Sam at the beginning of Two Towers? They're walking to Mordor. You know what they're doing at the end of it? They're walking to Mordor. Yeah. Interlacing them. If you just take the chapters of Two Towers and you mix them back and forth, it's better. That's the part I like about the movie better, is that they go. It's not front loaded Aragorn and then back loaded.
Up until you, I could tell if a person had read the Lord of the Rings book by asking them which was their favorite movie, and if anybody who answered the Two Towers that I had talked to previously, they had never read the books.
Yeah, the books are better, but the pacing of the books is worse. They are because the
books are going to be a longer slog as opposed to a 3-hour movie.
The books are also not like a hero narrative, and the movies are. The books are a fictional travelogue, and they're an exercise in world building by a lit scholar.
Yeah, who actually is concerned about the languages.
Right. I used to have to tell. That's why how we got onto this side digression. The people who watched Lord of the Rings and loved it, you will be disappointed by the books, because like things that you remember really well from the movies, like the battle at Balin's tomb, that's like 2 paragraphs in the book, because Tolkien doesn't care about narrating the action, and a lot of the dialogue, it ain't there. Because he doesn't write that much dialogue compared to the movies.
The best example of that is the Battle of the Five Armies in The Hobbit. Because basically Frodo gets hit.
It's a whole movie.
Yeah, and that's basically half the movie, and it's not even a page.
When we saw The Hobbit, my wife was like, is this all narrated? And I was like, this isn't even in the books. None of this even happens. It's all happens off camera. They're like, oh yeah, battle was real crazy. But anyway, yeah. So like, again, and all these are good examples of, I think you do, if you are a Lord of the Rings movie super fan, I think you owe it to yourself to try the books, but you owe it to yourself to have some expectations about what you are and are not going to get from that. You're not going to get a version of what you saw. You're going to get the thing that inspired the thing you saw. And Game of Thrones was the same way. If you love Game of Thrones season 1, sure, go read the book, but honestly, it's not that different. And the longer you watch the show, the less relevant the books are. And I think Watchmen, I kind of hope it's the same way. I hope by the end of it, people are like, oh, I remember that squid thing. I never followed up on that. I hope we drift a little further to where I hope 1 is the bunch of throwbacks for the fans, and then the show goes off. And 2 feels like that happened. 2 has, in my opinion, very little to do compared to episode 1. Not to say nothing, but very little.
But I think before it's all said and done, we're going to have to see Dr. Manhattan again back on Earth. So I mean, I think that's going to have to. It's going to have to happen, I think. Now, I'll be completely wrong, and if that happens, then obviously we're not drifting away from the comics.
2's got a lot of Dr. Manhattan adjacent stuff, if that helps you.
Okay, all right.
I really wanted to start blurting spoilers at you. I assume that everybody who would be listening would be like, just talk about 2. We've watched it. But you guys, the teacher in me is so mad that you didn't do your homework and you came to class unprepared for discussion. I tell you, I assigned the reading and you didn't do the reading, kids.
Well, you should be used to it then.
I know. No, man, they did my reading.
Hey, you didn't watch Joker, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't also put my hand on a stove for fun either. Like, punch myself in the nose if I want, but I don't. I will. I mean, I warned you up front. I would not see it.
Do not put your hand on a stove.
No. I warned you up front that I would not see Joker. When we said, should we talk about Joker? I said, I'm not seeing it, so I don't care.
Well, I won't go there.
I feel like I can talk about it because I read the Wikipedia, but yeah, I'm not seeing it. Not yet. But yeah, so grade?
Oh, at this point, I'm near mint, just because I like I said, I felt like after I watched the first episode of Daredevil, it's like, oh, this is so good. And I had that same feeling now, and I hope I'm not disappointed. But man, I love
Daredevil, but I don't think I was that hooked by episode 1. The first Daredevil that hooked me was the hallway fight scene, where I was like, oh yeah, this is just straight out of the comics. It's like Frank Miller put it on the screen, right? I liked the first episode of Daredevil. We binged it, right, like everybody did, and I was like, let's do another. But I did not watch 1 and be like, freaking amazing. So I think I liked this one better than I did everyone, and I love Daredevil. Well, not disagreeing with you on that.
And I think I watched Daredevil within the whole thing within like a 24-hour period. So it really was. It's like how I felt.
We watched like 2, 3, 4 episodes or something like that, and then we took a break.
I think I watched half of them like on a Friday and half of them on Saturday.
I will tell you this: if HBO had released Watchmen as a Netflix show and I could binge it, I'd have watched it all already.
Well, it's actually been very well. If they would have done that, I would have had it all watched. But I just didn't have time. I didn't have time from Sunday night to now to actually get the second episode watched. So
you're gonna like it when we the next time we do I don't know, maybe we'll do in November, we'll do a catch up on the episodes and talk some more. We'll have like 4 of them to watch or something by then.
Yeah, okay, then I'd be all for that.
Yeah, and then we'd be right about the halfway point. It'd be kind of cool.
Yep, sounds good.
So cool. Maybe we'll come back with that. Hey, Dan, closing thoughts. What's your grade?
Our grade, yeah.
I'll say very fine for right now. I can see it going up. Just need to see more of this. I see where they're going with it. It's an intro episode where you're not explained a whole lot.
I'm legitimately super curious to hear what you guys think about 2.
Yeah,
I really am. Like I keep ragging at you, but
by the time we talk about this again, I will have forgotten about it.
I feel like 2 has enough stuff that will put you on your ear a little bit. Like it definitely adds more complications. Like it feels some things get answered and some more things get created, and it's really, really cool. I like 2 a lot. The other friend of mine that I talk about the show with a lot, Brian, who used to work here for a brief period too, Brian Miller. But he thought 2 was not as good as 1, but he still liked it a lot. I think that's probably where, but I'm talking about like I would go 10 for 1 and like 9.5 for 2.
It's going to be hard for the second episode to be as good as the first episode.
It was exactly what I think too. Like so good. It's not a criticism of 2. It's just 1 was like 1 exceeded my expectations. I think because I was a little like looking askance at this. I remember telling my wife, like, we're going to watch it, right? And she's like, do you want to? And I said, well, I feel like I have to, and then we watched it and I was like, wow, that was pretty freaking great. Like, okay. So that's where I don't make the Daredevil comparison. I expected to like Daredevil, and I did. So I didn't get blown away until I had that fight scene, right? This one, I was like, we'll give this Watchmen crap a try. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, I take it all back. It's all really, really good.
I feel like it's harder to grade these per episode just in the context
for
of
sure.
the season story arc, that kind of thing.
Well, it's just because it could all change.
Yeah.
It's like the feeling I had like after watching the second Matrix movie. It's like, I guess if the third one ends up being really good, then this will be okay.
The
But the third
second one's the reason I've never seen the third one.
But
I thought the second one was terrible, and we never went back.
I was just like, I don't know. So, but if the third one had been awesome, which it wasn't, so you didn't miss anything not seeing the third episode.
I once got yelled at by some people in here of our spoilers years after that came out, and I hadn't even seen it. Yeah, I said something about like something having a letdown of a trilogy, and they were like, name one trilogy that had a letdown. I was like, what? I can name a lot of trilogies that had a letdown. And they're like, fine, name one. And I was like, Matrix? They're like, what happened? I'm like, they declare a truce in the end. And he was like, I've never seen that. First of all,
why
you
did
asked.
you bring it up?
Second of all, it was years ago. It was like it had been out for like 2 or 3 years, and he stormed out of here angry. And I was like, bye bye. And he never came back. It was just some rando dude.
Right.
But he was real mad. So anytime I talk about the last Matrix, I will remember being yelled at. You have to give me a spoiler alert. I was like, you asked me.
The question, yeah.
You asked me for a letdown trilogy, and I gave you one. Yep. So, Matrix fans, no respect for them.
Yes. Just stop at the first one. Do yourself a favor. Stop at the first one.
Yup. Yep. They
And
don't
hope
get
that the
better.
fourth one doesn't have to rely on episodes 2 and 3. So
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure it won't.
yeah.
I'm oddly optimistic about it, to be real honest. It's had some time. They've had some time to think about what they've done. They got sent to their room and they thought about what they did.
And they did Speed Racer.
They did. And some anime, which was not terrible, honestly.
Really?
Yep. So yeah, we've gone all over the place, man,
yeah.
and way longer than you'd think for a non-previews episode too.
Well,
I don't know how long these are normally.
We had a lot of
talk
topics.
about.
Well, we're
I
at an
think
hour
this
and
is-
35, 40 minutes. So
Other
we're
than the
about
Dennis
regular.
interview, I think this is the first time I've been on one of these that wasn't a previews episode, right? I think I've done nothing but previews episodes until now on Dennis.
No, I don't
I'm
think
not for
so.
sure. I don't know. I'll have to go back and check. So I don't remember. I
I
thought we'd
don't
done some
think that's the
other,
case.
talking about some stuff before.
Yeah.
Just some random.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just forgetting it. Maybe I blocked it out.
Maybe.
Well, you've been on some of like where we talk about our favorite Superman or Batman stories.
Yeah, but did we do
right?
that at the end of some previous ones?
We would record those after a preview. So we record a previous episode and record
Oh,
another
okay,
episode.
what it
okay.
is.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I didn't understand that.
Sometimes
Yeah,
we-
Don't
yeah,
tell
you're
them.
right.
Don't tell them how it works.
Oh,
No, you're
They don't
right.
See behind the curtain.
I do,
now.
and I do legitimately listen to our own podcast, but I don't know that somehow I was thinking of like picturing myself here at the
Right.
table
Yeah,
recording, and I was
right.
like, I don't remember being here for one of these that didn't have previews out everywhere. Yeah, other than the Dennis episode. Yep. Okay, so then, man, are we going to be coming back shortly with previews? Today is previews day.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that off air.
Okay.
So,
But
we'll-
that'll be next time.
that'll
It'll
be
be,
next
it'll be a
time.
previews
So
episode.
sometime
We'll be
in
back
November.
in the nearish future.
Yeah, sometime
too distant future.
First couple weeks of November, we'll be back with a previews episode.
I have to say,
So-
it feels super strange not going with our outro of like recommended books and what the deadline is. On
I was
previews.
thinking,
I don't know how to end the show.
I don't know what to recommend as an investment book. Oh wait, we're not talking about that.
We'll just
So-
recommend Watchmen.
There
And
you
by
go,
the way,
yeah.
one last thing before we leave. You were saying it feels unfair to judge it this way. The thing I like about this is it is like reading comics.
Oh, for sure.
Like we're judging it in installments with the serialized. So I get why you would want to read it all. That's a trade paperback.
Yeah,
you want to watch
yeah.
the whole show when it's
well,
done.
again,
But I
like
kinda-
comics, this
Yeah,
show
yeah.
is set up that way.
Yeah, I kind of like that we might do it a little bit issue by issue. That's kind of fun.
I also like that I'm going to have time. Like, okay, my favorite shows on TV are Mr. Robot, The Expanse, and now Watchmen. And all of those, whenever each episode comes, now it's going to be different for, I guess, the fourth season of The Expanse. But like, I watch those shows. I try to watch them twice.
Expanse is coming out bingeable, right?
Yeah, I think so. So that's kind of. But previously, when it was on USA,
week to week.
I would watch those episodes twice before the next episode come out. And I actually, I'm going to kind of enjoy like with the Watchmen. I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to watch it twice a week. So just to
I've
take
watched
in the extra stuff.
I watched episode 1 of Watchmen twice, and I watched episode 2 once, and then I think we'll probably end up watching it at the office, which means I'll watch episode 1 3 times. But I think I'll probably end up watching every episode twice mostly.
Well, I'm definitely going to watch 2 next, and then I'll probably go back and watch 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think I liked 1 more the second time, and I caught some things that I didn't catch the first time too.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be par for the course with this series, though.
It's going to be a very rewatchable show. And those recaps that you see online, if we're like, "Did you catch?" Those are fascinating, right? And I love that. It's a great reason to love Twitter, man. end. Like Birth Movies Death does the like, here's all the things you may have missed kind of stuff. So.
I always like it when you go to those and you caught all the stuff. That
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
You're like, nailed it, flex.
Got it, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we have no real outro system here, and it feels super awkward. But I'm
So
just gonna
if you
say,
wanted to follow along,
we got to do that.
yeah,
we got to
there
do
you
the
go.
thing. If you'd like to buy pirated T-shirts, Dan, tell them where we can find those.
Oh gosh.
If you want to buy official shirts from me, you check out my TeePublic store, Detective 651. Holidays are coming up. We got a lot of sales on the way, so get them cheap. Don't wait around on these shirts. If you see a design you like, get it. It may not be there tomorrow.
I'm glad you made that joke because I was thinking.
So yeah, pick them up. Check out my Twitter or my Instagram. Got a lot of kind of wrapping up Inktober right now. Been doing a lot of Dick Tracy stuff this month
It's
on
been
there.
really good.
Oh, thanks.
I didn't have a chance to tell you in person until now, but it's really good. And as a guy who is a casual Dick Tracy fan but does like Dick Tracy stuff, you've done a really nice job of all the Dick Tracy
thanks.
characters.
Because it's been a crazy month. It has been super, and I've been trying to put some time into those.
I showed Mona the other day, and I the same way that the people who do NaNoWriMo, the November novel writing thing, and I think, dude, what is your November like?
Yeah.
But that's just clicking things on a keyboard. I've been a writer. I understand how writing works. You can get a lot of writing in real fast. You're probably motivated. Your hand only moves so fast when you're drawing on a page. So I showed my wife, and I was like, he's been doing these every day. This is crazy. And not really a slippage in quality, man, for a guy who is making himself.
I could see the slip in
some
quality.
Some are better than others,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that it has over the month dipped a little. But
I try to end strong with it though too.
Whenever you have a full-time job and you're also doing
when
Inktober,
you have two
right.
jobs,
there you
almost
go.
kind of three right
well,
now.
that's what I say. You
Yeah,
work
yeah.
6 days a week,
So,
and you do a podcast, and you're doing a different. It's really, if there's any drop in quality, it has been very slight. And
He's like
very
He's
understandable.
like, Matt, stop talking. I have to go home and ink.
That's
I haven't had dinner and I have a dog to feed.
That's what I'm doing after this. Is today's Inktober drawing. So yeah, that's real. But yeah. Well, I appreciate that because I do see the dip in quality, and again, I see things people don't, that kind of thing, and I know how I feel when I'm doing these.
And you also know where you cut a corner to save yourself some time or something too.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to notice that, and I don't.
Hopefully,
I don't think other people are going to either. You're doing really nice work. It's good stuff.
But yeah, check out the TeePublic store.
Yep.
Scott Reed, you can find me at burgcomics.com, burgcomics.com. Convention seasons are over for me until like March or April of next year.
But
so
that doesn't mean the deals aren't on your Facebook.
No, they're
page.
on the Facebook page, on eBay. And I even post some stuff on Instagram, just books. So follow me in any of those spots.
And I'm Matt Martin. I'm, as always, at Wookie Copilot, WOOKIEECOPILOT, on basically everything. So, all right, we will talk to you guys soon with a previews cast in the very near future. Take care. Even better. That microphone to even buy Dan dinner. That's the kind of guy Dan Brown is, I tell you, and I want that recorded for posterity.
I'll send you a WAV file of that.
That's even better. That'll be my voicemail from now on.